All right, we are starting our live stream. Everything's looking good here, seeing the audio going. Yeah, so we're here for let's see, a book club number 7 for drawing of the 3. And we will go ahead and get started. And yeah, so let's go ahead and hit the intro real quick.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. Man in black fled across. Gunslinger followed. Time we had our own Palaver, and it's going to take dauntless thughorn to lips, piled to the Dark Tower.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's Magnum Opus, the Dark Tower series. My name is Tad.
And I'm Peter.
And we're here for book club number 7 for drawing of the 3.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're starting to get heated here. You know, we got through the clearing of the customs, and now it's time to
the ritual. I love that.
Face an even more dangerous thing from what we've been hyped to up to this point. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get into the intro. And before we dive in, I guess even before the intros, I could just let everyone know, just in case you are not following on social media. I don't know necessarily if there is people that don't follow us on either of the social media things that we do, but if so, you'll notice obviously that we didn't record last weekend, and we're here now doing a recording. So I had a family emergency that pretty much took up most of my time last weekend. It still isn't fully resolved, but things are definitely a little bit better than they were, and a little bit more stable than they were, medically speaking. But yeah, so we're here now, and just for a programming note is we will still be back next week to record. So basically this is we just delayed this one by a week. It's not going to throw off our schedule otherwise. So we'll have a show now and then a show next week. And then we'll be back on track for our every other week type thing. So I apologize about that. It was definitely something kind of out of the blue. I think it was like Thursday afternoon that it all kind of started for me. So from there, it was just like, I don't know. And even still, like I said, there's still not like entire answers to what's involved. But yeah, just health issues with family. So it's, one of those, took up a lot of time, took up a lot of mental energy and stuff. And I just didn't want to like phone in a book club last week, because that's probably what it would have been. Trying to squeeze it in would have been tough enough. But then even if I had, I felt like it would have just been, like blah. On my end. So just didn't think that was fair, so figured we can do it now, and we can roll with it and see what we find out here at this book club. So for the intros, first of all, if you have not finished the 7 books of Dark Tower series, you are totally okay, because these unless you're behind where we're at now, because with these episodes we don't go any further than the text that we are currently addressing. So if you're stuck in the middle of book 4, book 5, or maybe you're even starting book 7, these book club podcasts will be safe for you. We won't talk spoilers or anything, so long as you're caught up to where we're at and you're even reading along with us, you're totally safe. So go ahead and keep up with these book clubs until you finish the series, and jump on over to the roundtables. Next up, if you guys want to find us, you can find us on iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher. And you can also find us on basically any podcasting service. If there's ever, the only one I know of that's out there that's a little bit so-so is Spotify. They're really picky about what podcasts they'll take. I haven't entered us into applying for them yet, but I will and see what happens. But beyond that, though, you should be able to find us anywhere. Also, if you could be so kind as to subscribe, rate, and review us on all of those services, especially iTunes when it comes to the reviews, that will help us a lot. And then normally we'd have our show notes, which will be you right now. We're still building the website, so it still would be in our the podcast notes. But for a book club, we don't generally have anything when it comes to notes. So for this episode, don't worry about that. And then also we want you guys to join us, as you guys are part of our extended quartet. If you're new and you don't realize that, well, now you know. So you're part of our extended quartet. We want you guys to be part of the palavers, be it the round tables or the book clubs. You know, if you know we're drawing up on a specific spot of the books that you really love, or you have thoughts on, or have questions on, or whatever, you just want to discuss something about, go ahead and send it to us. Even if it's something that's a little bit ahead, like in the case of this, if you're on the third drawing, there's a note you had, you could always send that to us now. And when we got to that spot, I'd dust off that email and read it as part of our discussion. Or if it's something that, like if something that we covered today, you had thoughts on and wanted to email next time, we can always backtrack and talk about what you want to talk about. So Peter can tell you the best way to engage us. Sorry, that was a little bit of a different tangent than we usually do.
No, it's good. It's always good to throw it out there, because we've talked about it a couple times on the book clubs, especially with Gunslinger, but with Drawing the Three, we haven't really said it. But if you also, like Tad was saying, if you're doing something that's a book club related one, throw it in the subject line. Book club only, book club topic for this part, we'll know.
Yeah.
we know the Tower story pretty well. We'll know where you're talking about.
Just like Sylvia Pittston knows the Bible, going through it a few times. I think we've been through this a few times.
Praise the Lord. So if you want to reach out to us, email us. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. And then you can follow us on Twitter. It's @darktowerpod. That's @darktowerpod. And if you want to see the shows live as we're doing them, even the book clubs, we do them live, and we don't finish and post them. Is that right?
Yeah, we don't
explain that a little bit.
Yeah, we don't post them because what we do is if you haven't been with us before, and maybe you're jumping in right now, that's kind of odd. But everything about Dark Tower is odd, so no worries there. But if you've listened to a book club before, you know that we actually will use some of the sound bites from the audiobook to highlight certain, generally speaking, badass moments or really meaningful moments or whatever. Or maybe we just want to hear Frank Muller talk because, why not? Or George Guidel, because we did do him in the first book, and we'll get back to him a little bit later in the series. In the course of the rate that we're going, that might be 10, 15 years from now, but yeah, we'll get back to him at some point.
Eventually.
But yeah, so we use those sound clips, and as those are obviously copyrighted material, the first one that we did with YouTube with book clubs, it was pulled off of YouTube fairly quickly with a copyright notice. So I totally understand that and get that. So with those, if you join us live, you can be part of the conversation. Otherwise, you can listen to it through the podcast service. And if you have thoughts, you can email or whatever. But yeah, you couldn't really join us with, or if you can't watch the live stream, like the recap of the recording that we do with the live stream, you can go back and watch like the roundtable ones. You can't really do that with these because of the copyright issues.
Yeah. And so just like we've said before, Tad's mostly on Twitter. I'm mostly on Facebook. So if you want to reach out to a specific one of us, you can do it that way, or send us an email at our email and just, subject it. Tad sent me a couple where people have had, like direct things to show me or questions. So it's no problem to do it that way either.
Indeed. So we're in the 7th part of Drawing of the Three, and I can't remember how many did we do for the first book. I can't remember. It
wasn't that many.
I want to say we're getting close to the number that we did for the first book. I mean, it's a shorter book, obviously, but yeah, no, this one we've definitely talked in depth quite a bit. But
there's a reason for that. I mean, this is the book that both of us got drawn into the series.
Yeah, heavily.
No pun intended on that they're drawing us in and everything like that. But this was the book that both of us had the similar experience with Gunslinger, where it was, okay, this is a weird book, but Drawing of the Three was the one that was like, okay, yep, let's go.
Yeah.
Buckle up. I'm along for the ride. And so it makes sense that we're talking a little bit more, not to mention greatest character ever introduced,
Flag?
No, Eddie. You know it.
So yeah, this is number 7 that we're starting on here. So we can go ahead and jump right into it. So where we're at, I guess, to recap, we are Eddie and Roland have been picked up by Jack Andolini. Yep. And I'm blanking on the other guy's name now. All of a sudden, the guy that's with him in the car.
Isn't it Call?
Call. Yeah, yeah. So they picked them up in a pizza van, and they're now taking them to Balazar. because they got out of the airport. There's a little bit, and they know that Eddie knows they're in trouble a little bit because it's definitely not going to look right. The fact that he got out so quickly from the customs, like he got grabbed obviously because he wasn't out immediately, but he wasn't in there long enough to have done anything like to have like whatever. So he's gonna. It's basically comes down to he's probably gonna look like a snitch because if you get caught with drugs on an airplane, chances are you're gonna be put away for a long time. What did the stewardess say? He's going into a small room. It'll be the first in the series of small rooms for him.
Yeah,
like that's what you would be expecting. Or he walks right out because they didn't catch him. But to be caught up for 2 hours, that's not gonna look good. So
no, yeah. That's actually one of the first notes I have here is where Balazar talks about the time frame.
Yeah,
with it.
So that's where we're catching up. We've been introduced to Balazar now, and Simi, and that kind of stuff. And we're seeing him building a house or a tower of cards. But now we are getting into subchapter 10 of chapter. I did this last time too. What chapter is this part of? You have a physical book. I have a Kindle one. It's a little bit easier for you to flip there. I want to say, or does it say at the top of your page at all, the number?
No, it doesn't. I got to go all the way back.
Just gives you the title of the chapter.
Yeah, chapter 4, the tower.
Chapter 4. That's what I was thinking. Yeah, so we're subchapter 10 of chapter 4. That's where we're starting.
If you're in the physical book and you have the same edition as me, it's page 118.
Yeah, if you have the same one, that's certainly the big trick.
That's right, Mark. Johnny Cash.
And for I don't know if Kindle stays the same, but if it is, then Kindle would be page 135. I don't know if Kindle changes it up or if it's always the same. That I really don't know.
I think it may actually depend on how big your font size is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's true. So I guess if you make it
a little bit bigger, if you're really bad eyesight, make it bigger, you're going to have less words.
Well, I only have one eye. That's what people at work keep reminding me.
You're a zombie man. Tad's portion zombie. I'm watching you.
Oh, okay. So we'll go ahead and get started here into subchapter 10. You said you had a note here to start off?
It's a little ways down. I don't know if you want to see if you have anything first, but it's the part where he says that 2 hours was wrong.
Oh yeah. I had a note here right off the bat actually.
Yeah.
Just saying Balazar knew how everything would have to be. The Fed smelled Eddie. Maybe he had been stupid to send Eddie in the first place. Maybe his instincts were failing him. But Eddie had seemed somehow so right, so perfect. His uncle, the first man he had worked for in the business, said that there were exceptions to every rule, but one: never trust a junkie. Balazar had said nothing. It was not his place of a boy of 15 to speak, even if to agree. But privately had thought that the only rule to which there was no exception was that there were some rules for which that was not true. So if nothing else, I think this is interesting. It's just showing us this. So Balazar's been a dude that's been in this criminal lifestyle since 15. So he's that's, I don't know, I think that's interesting because we've seen quite a bit and we've talked quite a bit about the fact that so far we've hyped up Balazar to being a fairly influential, powerful, and dangerous person. And I feel like this, despite your Goodfellas, Henry Hill type stuff, I don't think, I don't know how many mafia people start at a young age like that versus get into it a little bit later in life. So,
well, it also, if we're going movie references here, it reminds me of The Departed. Finding the kids young. Like I forget Nicholson's character.
Yeah,
it's been a while.
Frank.
Yeah.
He
finds those
Costello,
kids.
maybe.
Yeah. Costello finds those kids early on. I mean, those kids were 13, 14, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 15. And they were doing little errands for him. Take this envelope here. Don't look inside of it. That kind of thing. That's kind of what this instantly reminds me of, is that mafia trope where it's, oh, he started that young, kind of thing.
And I think that would certainly, make him maybe a little bit more in tune to things within this lifestyle versus someone that maybe came into it after high school or whatever. I mean, yeah, or like in this case, we're talking, this is taking place in the 80s. I mean, somebody maybe, fought in Vietnam and came back and became a mobster. I know there's a lot of guys that happened to that, they were soldiers, and when they came back, it was just a natural thing to fall into like a lifestyle like mafioso.
A structure, which actually, lieutenants and underbosses and stuff like that where they're answering to someone. It was something that was very familiar to them.
Yeah, and also just like they're able to handle the violence and stuff that would be involved in being a mobster.
Yeah, they saw way worse over in Vietnam. What's the problem? Kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's that's just it's interesting to me because we're well aware now that he's basically the boss of this family. So yeah, just to see some backstory on him a little bit is interesting. So. And then go ahead with your note because I think that's the next one that I had as well.
Yeah, so he starts off with saying they had taken Eddie and held him a while and then let him go. Balazar had grabbed Eddie's brother and the stash they shared, and that would be enough to bring him. And he wanted Eddie. He wanted Eddie because it had been 2 hours, and 2 hours was wrong. And I love that there's like the emphasis on wrong. And I put it up on Facebook a while back that I started the series again, and I actually listened to this as well as read it this past week. The emphasis he puts on wrong here is really pronounced, and it's just something that really stuck with me. That's why it's my first note, is that 2 hours was wrong, and he goes on to explain it a little bit further down, but not right here. I thought it was right here for some reason. They had questioned him at Kennedy, not at 43rd Street, and that was wrong too. That meant he had succeeded in ditching most or all of the coke, or had he? And leaving the questions like that just shows you that Balazar's in a kind of a predicament here.
Yeah, it's one of those like it's an unknown. Like I feel like if he had been taken and it had lasted longer and stuff, I think that Eddie probably would have been killed pretty quick, probably even outside the airport or outside of 43rd Street, wherever the hell he was at. But I feel like this mystery is kind of what's driving Balazar to do what he's going to do here, and because he needs to know what's going on. Obviously, he knows also that he was on an airplane. So,
here's the part that it was just a couple like short paragraphs at it. He wondered. Eddie had walked out of Kennedy 2 hours after they took him off the plane. That was too short of a time for them to have sweated it out of him, and too long for them to have decided he was clean. That some stew had made a rash mistake. He wondered. So that right there is what I was talking about, is the questions is what his big problem. And if you skip a little bit down, it says, but still, how come no 43rd Street? How come no customs van, the ones that look like the post office trucks except for the wire grills on the back windows? Because Eddie really had done something with the goods, ditched them, hidden them. Impossible to hide goods on an airplane. Impossible to ditch them. Of course, it was also impossible to escape from certain prisons, rob certain banks, beat certain raps. But people did. Harry Houdini had escaped from straitjackets, locked trunks, fucking bank vaults, but Eddie Dean was no Houdini. Was he? Again, the question, he's in a real bind for answering questions here.
Yeah. It's that's the thing is like, it's keeping the mystery alive in his mind. I feel like we're basically in Balazar's mind here, and for him, it's just one of those things that the certainties that he would think that he would normally have in any situation, they're not there for this because none of it makes sense. It doesn't add up.
Yeah, it's one of the
things. This is saying 2 + 2 is 7. Like, and right? Something's wrong.
And then the worst part about it is not only just saying 2 + 2 is 7, but actually having the audience, us book readers, here, having the problem written out, showing us that 2 + 2 does equal 7.
Yeah.
So we know that they're not messing with us.
Yeah.
But we have to watch a character struggle with that math.
Yeah.
Basically, is the problem here, is that we know what happened to the coke.
Yeah.
We were there for it.
We've seen the supernatural element, and we've also gone through it heavily enough to where we understand the mechanics of it and everything like that. But obviously, these characters don't. They don't have that. They don't know that. So we're in one of those situations where, sometimes we'll end up in any book or movie where a character knows more than we do. And then it gets revealed to the audience. No, this is one of those times that the audience is way ahead of the characters. And
this is one of those ones where it's a mystery, who killed Tad? And the entire time the audience is screaming, don't trust Flag. He's a bad guy. We know this, because, the audience knows because they tell us that, who's the bad guy. So,
I don't know about that. So that, I actually do like that. I like that trope a little bit when it comes to for this, especially this story, to see like because we know, so it's just kind of fun. It's like knowing the magic trick or knowing, the ending of a story and watching other people enjoy it is always fun. And this is kind of an aspect of that. Like we know how the magic trick works, and now we're watching people being flummoxed by the fact that they don't know how it works.
But the other thing is that it builds such great tension too, because you're thinking, what is this character going to do? Because they don't see how the problem worked.
Yeah.
How are they going to react because they don't know, why he doesn't have the Coke, what's Balazar going to do? That's why there's so much tension when you're reading this, is because you're sitting here going, what is going to happen? Because he doesn't understand that Eddie has a supernatural being basically living in his head right now.
Yeah.
Helping him with the problems that he's facing.
That gives him a portal to another dimension. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Like Balazar can't wrap his head around that.
Yeah.
He even if he was told that, he'd just be like, okay, yeah, stop fucking with me, basically.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that now the tension is building because we don't know what Balazar is going to do.
Yeah.
We don't know what all these characters under Balazar is going to do, because we've already seen that there's a couple of guys with Balazar, then there's a few guys down the hall with Henry. So what's going to happen to Eddie when he gets here?
Yeah, and two of them with them too.
Yeah, and two with Eddie. Yeah,
including old Double Ugly as it is with Jack Andolini.
Yeah.
And then my next note was a little bit shortly after that. And it says he could have had Henry killed in the apartment, could have had Eddie cut down on the LIE, or better yet, also in the apartment, where it would look to the cops like a couple of junkies who got desperate enough to forget that they were brothers and killed each other. But that would leave too many questions unanswered. So I think right there, that kind of caps what we've been saying with the way that Kings wrote these last, in this last little chunk here, is it comes down to the reason that Eddie's still alive is because Balazar needs to know the answer.
Yeah, and the next paragraph actually goes into that. He says he would get the answers here, prepare for the future, or merely satisfy his curiosity depending on what the answers were, and then kill both of them. A few more answers, 2 less junkies, some gain, and no great loss.
Yeah,
we've heard that line before. No great loss.
Yes, we have in the Stand, as a matter of fact, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I had that underlined. I was like, no great loss.
That sounds familiar.
That's a good one. So, then we get over here to what Mark in the chat was referencing is the Trivial Pursuit that they're playing with Henry, and all he's doing is answering the same thing regardless of the question, and he's saying Johnny Cash.
Yeah, this question is the.
Did we see one in the previous chapter?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought
this is the second question, because it says right here the game had gotten around to Henry again.
Okay, that's right. I thought so.
Yeah.
But there's just a little bit of a disconnect because of how far since I've read the last
exactly.
chunk,
and the question here is, what is the only continent where kangaroos are a native form of life? A hush pause. Johnny Cash. So funny.
Yeah, that's a great one, and it definitely will pay off a little bit later here with more. And then we get into some different language speaking here. I haven't actually gone and translated.
It's Italian, right?
I would assume so. Yeah, Paisan. Yeah, that would be But I haven't gone to translate it, so I don't know necessarily what that's saying. I guess that's something I probably should have done. I don't know if anyone's done that before, but it's not something that I've ever done. But we do definitely get that he says Eddie Dean, because I listened to it just recently just to make sure I was fully caught up and refreshed on it. So I listened through this chunk and, just listening to it versus reading. Because, honestly, I'm one of those ones when I'm reading, if I hit something like this that I obviously can't read, I just skip it. I don't even, go through and, sound out the words. I just, oh, wow, it's another language. Let's find the next English part. And go from there. So.
It was really interesting listening to the audiobook because he spoke the Italian. It was just like,
yeah,
what? Huh? It's been so long since I read these that I was just like, Italian. I was like, what? They don't translate it for us? Oh, come on.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I guess if we have anyone that speaks Italian, he can go ahead and maybe clue us into what they're saying. Of course, we could always go through and do some Google Translate action down the road. But yeah, that's definitely an interesting thing for King to do. And also the other thing that trips me out with that is when this was written, I don't know, does King know someone that speaks Italian that he got him to do this? Or did he get a traveler's dictionary to it just makes me wonder. Cause nowadays, if you're an author, it'd be easy. Just throw on Google Translate and do what you need to do. But I was just thinking about that recently when it comes to how easy Google's made life. And with this being written in the early 80s, it would have been a difficult thing for Stephen King to, he couldn't just type this into a word processor and have it translate out to another language. So, be interesting to see how he did it. That'd be interesting to know. And then the next little bit we have is actually a little bit after that, or just after that Italian thing. I actually have a sound bite for it, so we will go ahead and hit that real quick and listen to this next little portion here.
11. When the van pulled Balazar, call Vince happened to be looking at Eddie. He saw something possible. He tried to speak and found himself. His tongue was stuck to the mouth, and all he could get out was a muffled grunt. Saw Eddie's eyes from brown to 12. This time Roland made no conscious decision to come forward. He simply leaped without thinking, a movement voluntary as rolling out of a chair and going for his guns when a room. A tower, thought Sleep. It's the tower, my God, the tower. Sky, the tower. I see sky drawn in lines of red fire. Cuthbert, Helene, Desmond, the tower, But this time he felt Eddie struggling, not against, but trying to talk, trying desperately to explain to him. The gunslinger, listening desperately as above a beat from unknown way in time, his mindless body trembled like the body of a man experiencing highest horror. 13. Sign! Eddie was his own head and into the head of that other. It's a sign! Just a neat. What tower it is you're talking about, but this is far. Salazar. After that one, it's just a fucking tower of Pisa. Let up! Let up! You want to get us killed? At them? Sir, gunslinger doubtfully and looked again. Sign. Yes, all right, he could. It was not the tower, but a sign.
Okay, so first of all, Frank Muller, hail.
Yes.
Because he is wonderful. His Eddie is great. Yeah, just incredibly well done when it comes to Eddie. But yeah, that's a pretty cool moment here. So so first of all, in subchapter 11 here, Carl Vincent is looking at Eddie, so he actually sees his eyes change. So this is something that we've been through before here with the army women on the airplane. So we're going to be seeing the same thing here, where now it's kind of somewhat exposing them to potentially a hostile force, of the fact that something's going on, because now this character doesn't even have the ambiguity of the bathroom to maybe think that it's like contacts. Like, no, he's sitting there watching as Eddie's eyes change from brown to blue. So that's definitely interesting for sure. Did you have any?
I had one thing I wanted to clarify, and I'm wondering if it's just me, not everyone. But I swore that the stewardess was commenting because Eddie had hazel eyes, not brown eyes.
Yeah, but isn't hazel like just light brown?
I thought it was green. I thought hazel was green eyes.
I have no idea.
That's what I was like. I actually just Googled it, and hazel is green eyes. So I was like, wait, why is it brown now? So I wrote that down as a note, just like there's been a couple in this book so far where we talked about one with the very beginning of the book where they're talking about the walking along the beach, and east was to the left, but they were walking north.
Yeah, well, we could always knowingly say that at this time period, Stephen King and the Devil's Powder was on friendly terms. So I actually honestly didn't catch that, to be honest with you. And like, honestly, I would have guessed that hazel was brown. I don't know.
I thought so too, but then I was like, the more I thought about it, because it mentions it a couple more times, brown eyes and stuff like that, and I was just like, I could have sworn that his eyes were hazel, and that's green.
Well, the other thing here is we're later in the day, so he's seeing it in like a dark car, right? So,
oh wait, isn't also the hazel and green? Aren't those the ones where your eyes can sometimes look brown, sometimes they look green?
Possibly.
Okay.
But also it'd be darker, right?
Yeah,
like they're in a car on the street versus like being in an airplane that has almost clinical lighting, like lighting that's similar to like a doctor's office even. So that could explain it as well, like in universe type thing. And maybe that's one of those ones that does tend to change the color a little bit more. I'm not as familiar with that.
Yeah, that was my last note, was the sound clip. So there.
Yeah. And then into subchapter 12, I love that when it says here that Roland made no conscious decision to come forward, but he leapt without thinking, a movement as involuntary as rolling out of a chair and going for his guns, and someone burst into a room.
Yeah.
That just is, I don't know, that to me, again, that just speaks to like the prowess of Roland. I mean, even though this is only using it as an aside and like a comparison, but I still love it though, because I just like, I don't know, it just shows what kind of person he is, you know, like in terms, yeah, when it comes to like that kind of stuff. But then he's like is going crazy here. He sees the tower, and what I find interesting here is he calls out Cuthbert, which we've met, Alan, which we met in book 1, right, in their flashback portions.
Yeah, he was one of the ones there for Roland's trial.
Yeah, but this Desmond though is one that we're not familiar with. We didn't.
I think it's the first time he's been mentioned.
Yeah, so as he's calling out these names, you know, then Eddie obviously kind of comes over him and, you know, kind of just says like, you know, hey, dude, it's a sign, a neon sign. But again, so this is the thing we talked about it last time as we started this chapter, how tantalizing it was for Stephen King to use the name, the Tower for this, because we as readers were sitting here reading, chances are, you know, unless you're reading it to begin with. I don't know if this book was originally published with the Dark Tower as a header or not. Oh yeah, yours doesn't.
Mine doesn't.
So, and yours isn't even a first edition. So yeah, no, so it wouldn't have been there. But for a lot of us that read it more recently, chances are we were reading one that says, you know, Dark Tower 1, Dark Tower 2, that kind of thing.
Even the picture you put up on YouTube has it.
Yeah, and this is actually the audiobook cover. I think it came probably from Audible because it does say with Frank Muller. But yeah, so like I guess what's on the screen would be a good indicator of what I think a lot of people that have read it more in the more recent era would have seen. So it's one of those things that we still don't know what the Dark Tower is. So, you know, for a chapter to be called The Tower, you know, then it turns out Stephen King's just bamboozling us, and it just turns out it's nothing but a sign for Balazar's place.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Mark is saying I caught the C on the wrong side as well. That it threw me a bit. Yeah, because I think you mentioned that you caught. That's just not, again. I don't know why. That's just maybe it's the way I read. I don't have like that geographical to me.
It's just something that's stuck with me. You know, being born and raised in Utah, we got mountains on both sides.
Yeah.
Big mountains are east, little mountains are west. So when it says that he's walking north and the mountains were on his left side on the east, it was just like, wait, no, the sea would be on his left. That would be the west.
I think a lot of people do catch on to it. I mean, Mark did, you did. I think a number of people have mentioned it, but it's just something that for me, it's never really been something that stood. It just, I don't know. It's just not the way I read, you know, like with things like that. Like I will say I tend to like, except for audiobook, that's one thing that's improved for me with audiobooks. Because I think honestly, sometimes descriptive stuff in general, I tend to like, not skip, but I kind of brush over it a little bit more.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit a while ago. I think it was in Gunslinger we talked about it. It was I'm big on reading descriptions and sometimes miss things in speaking.
Yeah.
And you are the opposite. You sometimes miss things in description and catch a lot of which is why if you look at a lot of the stuff when we're going through the book clubs, you'll see me reading a lot of paragraphs that are description, and Tad will be reading a lot of paragraphs that are conversations.
Yeah.
So,
and it's exactly.
It's just interesting to see different reading patterns come out like that. It's something that even in all of our years of friendship, we never would have known until we started doing this.
Yeah.
It's just one of those benefits of doing this show that we know that.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just when it comes to that kind of thing, like that's probably why I never would have caught on to things like that. It's just because that's just the way I read, I guess. So yeah. So what do you got next?
I got a note here in subchapter 14 about call.
Oh, okay. I got one more note in
go ahead.
13, Lucky 13. Let's see. And then I love this because just like connecting like the larger universe that King is building here is when Roland's trying to read the sign. It says the first word was 3 letters. The first was T, the last was E. The middle one, which he had never seen, Trey, he asked Eddie. It doesn't matter. You see, it's a sign, right? That's what matters. And then he said, and then Roland says, I see. The gunslinger answered, wondering if the prisoner really believed what he was saying or was only saying it to keep the situation from spilling over, as the tower depicted in those lines of fire seemed about to do. Wondering if Eddie believed any sign could be a trivial thing. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot packed in there. For one, I guess they don't have H's in the high speech, or they have them, but it's going to be a different like
way of writing it.
Yeah, and it reminds me because there's like I had a reprint that I inherited at one point, and nothing like crazy fancy. It was just a duplicate thing of like the Constitution, and there was some letter in there that was different. Like it was like once you started reading, you started to realize like, oh, okay, I get it, but like a letter that we would have, it's a completely different letter in its place, and I can't remember what letter it is. It may even be H, but I can't remember.
If I remember right, it is H.
Yeah, so maybe that Stephen King even went back and looked at that, like almost like an older form of English, and
yeah,
because
Old English and English are two different things. You know, like have you ever heard a poem in Old English?
Yeah,
it's not English basically.
Yeah,
it sounds way different. So it's along those lines, because the Old English alphabet, if I remember right, only has like 20 letters. Or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say, I mean, I don't know if colonial time was using Old English necessarily, or if it was even just like
But it was like the official document language, I think is what it was still around
that time. More formal.
It was like dying out kind of thing, but I think that's what it was, if I remember right.
Yeah. So it's just that, like, that when I read that, that's what came to mind to me, is I remember, because I'm a huge history fan, so like I think it was given to me by some, older person. I don't know if it was a grandpa or an uncle or someone gave it to me, and I remember looking at it and just being like, oh wow, like as I tried to read it, it's like, oh, there's something like way different there. Like, it was something like really, like honestly, I don't remember what it was, but for example, let's just say it was like H's became S's or something. So then suddenly the is TSE or something. To where it's like, it doesn't make any sense. But then when you start to look at the context, you're like, well, I kind of know what this line would be in the Constitution.
Right.
So, okay. So they've that kind of thing. And once you fill that in, you're like, okay.
Then your brain
sense.
just auto fills it in after that point. Mark's confirming our thing. He says, ye used to be pronounced as in ye old English.
Yeah,
there was no H back then. So yeah, that's exactly what we thought and remember.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So I found that interesting that like the speech that Roland has doesn't have that, so he's kind of trying to sound out something different there. And then also I think the other big thing here is that last line, wondering if Eddie believed any sign could be a trivial thing. So
yeah,
that's it's hugely informative in a way to me, because that's saying that Roland comes from a culture that values things like signs and omens and stuff like that. So, and I want to say, didn't we kind of get some of that in the first book? We got some indication of that when we were with Jake and Roland in the desert. There were some different things that were seen and different things that were said that was just like, oh, okay, like I'm blanking on what they are now.
Well,
but
one of the big ones was the demon station.
Yeah,
where Roland goes down and gets the jawbone, and Jake's ready, like, no, get rid of it. And Roland's like, no, it has power. It has a purpose.
Yeah.
There's a ritual here that I have to follow and everything like that. Just different worlds like that. And that's kind of what Roland's referring to here with Eddie. Any sign could be a trivial thing. I mean, for us here, see speed limit signs anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I find that interesting. That just because again, it speaks towards Roland, and not only that, but it speaks towards Roland by comparing him against Eddie, which Eddie's one that we would feel, we would feel some like familial connection to. So it's like, it shows now what's different between us and Roland. So
it also kind of goes back to what he says on the airplane about the people on the airplane, like saying that they're slow and they would fight, but they would whine and cry the entire way. Yeah, exactly.
And if you chopped open their belly, they look at you with dumb shock.
Yeah, that line, that kind of just brings me back here when I think about it, like not in the context of like an actual billboard sign. When I start thinking about like what you said, like a sign, like an omen almost.
Yeah.
It's almost like those people, like we wouldn't look at something like a sign, like of the tower. Oh, Roland is looking for the tower. 99% of us wouldn't be like, oh my God, it's a sign, it's an omen, Most of us would be like, dude, chill, it's a neon sign. Shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Exactly like Eddie does.
Because I think that we live in a more pragmatic world. So like
Right.
we're looking at just hard facts more than like, signs and omens. We're not we're not superstitious. We're a little stitious, as it were, but not not superstitious. So forgive the Office reference there.
Shut up.
Hey, I have to like at least throw it out there just so people don't, if they're unfamiliar with it, they don't think that like I'm that stupid, Yeah, so that's that. I find that really cool. So go ahead with chapter or subchapter 14 that you were getting to.
Yeah, so Call tries to mention to Jack, and Jack just doesn't take it. So it goes, you saw it, part of his mind insisted, but had he? Call was 24, I think it's Call is how it's pronounced. And for the last 21 of those years, no one had really believed him trustworthy. Useful sometimes, obedient almost always, if kept on a short leash. Trustworthy? No. Call had eventually come to believe it himself. Nothing, he muttered. Then let's go, Andolini said. And that was, I always think that's interesting because you always seem to get that one chance for them to avert something.
Yeah.
And we don't want it to happen.
No, but in some cases the hero's the same way.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see something where, like it's like they have this fort or something and a character sees like a weakness and it's like, oh, maybe I should say something. Oh, no, never mind.
Yeah.
And you as the audience, you're like, no, say something.
That's going to come back and bite you in the ass kind of thing. It's just right here too. This is one of those moments where it's a moment where I clench up when I was reading it the first time. Just like, oh no, is he going to? Oh, good, he didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I just think it's interesting seeing like the frame of mind here of Call, and I think I'm saying that right, Call.
Yeah, I think that's how
Call Vincent.
Yeah.
Just seeing inside of his mind a little bit. It's so interesting that King does that sometimes, where he'll take such a random, minute character and just give you an insight into his or her life and well-being and everything like that. We got it a lot in book 1 with Allie.
Yeah.
Like most writers would have. Yeah, she was the bar wench that banged Roland.
Yeah.
That's it. But we got insight into her.
Yeah, and he fleshed her out to be beyond just a two-dimensional character.
Right.
That a lot of authors probably would have made her or kept her at being. Maybe they would have. I think a lesser author would have just focused on Roland and Sylvia Pittston. I think because that's your main players.
Right.
But I think that's what makes like King's writings generally so good, in my opinion, and so much deeper is that they do go in depth to like show you. Like look at something like The Stand. Like that book's like 1,100 pages, and it's like it's that for a reason. There's a lot of characters involved in that book.
Exactly.
And some of them you follow for a chapter or two, and that's it. Other ones you're with them for the long haul. But it's like that book, like if you went through and parsed it out and just did like they would do in movies or TV shows, where you see how many speaking parts are there. God, what would you think it would be for The Stand? It'd be if it was.
It would easily be up in the 50s
if it was a direct adaptation of the book to where it was just like word for word. We're just translating what was.
Higher.
Yeah, it'd be
because you go into some of the stuff with The Stand, and I'm not going to give any away spoilers. For
no,
that
but it's huge.
But the thing with The Stand is there's parts of the story that are not even directly linked to the main story.
Yeah,
King goes off on so many tangents in that one, where we have insights into an entire incident in a newsroom and everything like that 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
We have stories where he does an entire chapter, and this is one of my favorite chapters that King's ever written, where it's just cause and effect. This happened, here's what happened after that, kind of thing. And you know what chapter I'm talking about. It's the one you showed me even before I read the book, and it's just like things like that. But then even like this one, like back to Call, it's such a deep insight, and I don't know if you just, again, glossed over it because it's not a speaking part, but, I mean, Call was 24, and for the last 21 of those years, no one had really believed him trustworthy. At 3, they stopped trusting him.
Yeah.
I mean, just
who trusts a 3-year-old?
Well, I mean, no, but think about
they're
that,
treacherous little creatures.
Creatures. Listen to you. But, just think about that for a second. From someone being raised that from 3 on, no one even thinks you trustworthy ever, basically. And he has to be kept on a short leash kind of thing. Yeah, of course he ended up as a freaking mobster criminal type. I mean, what else was he going to be? So it kind of just, like, for me, it was just one of those moments that, like, I think it was my second or third time through, I caught that line and caught this paragraph. That's why I marked it for this one. And just, like, it was like, man, when you think about it, that one line right there thrown in just shows you so much depth.
It gives you some depth for him.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
This character is a guy picking up the main character. You know, he's not. You know, we don't know how long he's going to be in there, but it doesn't seem like he's going to be in there for very long. So it's just like weird.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and then the last bit here, they got out of the pizza van with Andolini on their left and Vincent on their right. Eddie and the gunslinger walked into the leaning tower. So that is
a good line to finish chapter.
Kind of a dun dun dun, and that's not
all right. No, I'm just kidding.
That's not even just the end of the sub chapter, but that's the end of the chapter. So now we move over to chapter 5, called Showdown and Shootout. So yeah, that's a fun title, and hopefully it's a little bit more of a payoff than the last one with the whole tower thing.
Yeah,
it's just like, wouldn't it be funny if King just did it again and just like, oh, Uncle Stevie, he can be a cruel one. So my first note here is in the very beginning, the tail end of this first paragraph is that Henry Dean's last rocket went up just about 5 minutes before the van pulled up in front of the leaning tower, and his brother was herded inside. And it's giving a reference to Billie Holiday singing a song talking about because one more rocket gonna be your last. So yeah, we're basically getting it here that Henry Dean is not much longer for this world. So that was my first note. And then down below here, we start to get a little bit of a description of George Biondi, even just saying like what his friends call him versus what his enemies call him. And then let's see. Do you have any notes on this section?
I kind of just took a whole note down with like this, where since Henry had been only answering Johnny Cash, they basically tried to set him up for it.
Yeah.
You know. And then my real note where I wanted to read came after that. So if you have anything in there, go ahead.
No, it's just okay. So basically, yeah, it's just the joke is like basically he's on the wrong category and stuff. So this isn't actually on the card. He's just inventing this all, and he gives him the question that the answer would be Johnny Cash. And then of course Henry being brother of Eddie,
the great sage and eminent junkie,
answers Walter Brennan. So. Just kind of funny to be saying Johnny Cash constantly, and then when the answer should be Johnny Cash, he gives him something totally different. But go ahead. What do you got?
So it goes with Walter Brennan. Henry said at last. Bellows of laughter. Jimmy Haspio clutched Kevin Blake. Kevin punched Jimmy in the shoulder repeatedly in Balazar's office. The house of cards, which had now become a tower of cards, trembled again. Quiet down, Jimmy yelled. The boss is building. They quieted at once, kind of showing you again. Yeah. How important these, cards things, tower building is. And then, right, George said. You got that one right, Henry. It was a toughie, but you came through. Always do, Henry said. Always come through in the fucking clutch. How about a fix? Good idea, George said, and took a Roy Tan
cigar box.
Roy Tan cigar box from behind him. Bromedy produced a hypo. He stuck it into the scarred vein above Henry's elbow, and Henry's last rocket took off.
Yeah, so yeah, it looks like they're giving him a fix, as it were, and it will be his last. It looks like. So yeah, that's a brutal one. That puts us into subchapter 2. My first note is just a little bit in here. It says, as Balazar had said on more than one occasion, you couldn't beat the bastards unless you can compete with the bastards, unless you can match their equipment. It was expensive stuff, but Balazar's side had an advantage. They stole what the DEA had to buy at grossly inflated prices. There were electronics company employees all the way down the eastern seaboard willing to sell you top secret stuff at bargain basement prices. These Cazzaroni, and it says in parentheses, Jack Andolini called them Silicon Valley cokeheads, practically threw the stuff at you. And what this reminded me of instantly is Scarface.
Yeah.
Toward the tail end when Scarface is kind of on the top of the world, he starts to put in all kinds of money in anti-surveillance technology in his mansion, and his buddy even calls him on it. He's like, you're spending so much money on all this stupid technology and stuff, and it's just like this paranoia that goes along with and so that's what instantly came to mind for me is Scarface. And the other thing, to be honest with you, I never thought much about it, and I guess it makes sense, but for some weird reason, Silicon Valley, I would not have guessed that existed back, like that phrasing existed back in the 80s. I mean, I get that like technology was around and stuff, but I don't know why I've always kind of associated Silicon Valley with the more modern like usage of like the like .com type stuff, so it's just to hear it, like I think I even read it a few times and like whatever, and it was actually even after I listening to it a few times where I just like it finally struck me, I'm like, wait a minute, Silicon Valley, like It's just something like I had never looked into, and it makes sense that it did exist. But if you would have asked me, did Silicon Valley, did that phrase exist in the 80s, in the early 80s, I would have said no.
Yeah, because isn't it meaning computer parts?
Well, yeah, but
Right?
I'm just saying that generally speaking, it's always used now as like more on like the software side or the whatever. But it makes sense.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but I mean, IBM was around, Microsoft, all that kind of like, yeah, all that stuff was around, but like it just wasn't what it was. I don't know. It's just one of those weird disconnects in my mind that I just wouldn't have guessed Silicon Valley was an older phrase like that, something that would have been around back then. So that kind of threw me off a little bit. But
no, yeah, I got you.
I don't know, kind of weird. Yeah, let's see. Next up is, do you have anything?
Right at the end here, in Balazar's office, the intercom uttered a single short buzz. "That's them," he said. "Claudio, let them in. Seeming, you tell everyone to dummy up. So far as Eddie Dean knows, no one's here with me but you and Claudio. See me go in the storeroom with the other gentleman." They went. See me turn left, Claudio and Delaney going right. Calmly, Balazar started on another level of his edifice. That just kind of like the shootout, scenario. That what that is for me is the boots on the ground, kind of thing. Like, "Sheriff, I'm calling you out," and then the sheriff's boots hit the street. That's it for me right there. That's all I picture whenever I see that. Read this chapter or hear it, is always that. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, yeah. And so he's got a bunch of people. I love that he says "dummy up" basically as a way of saying shut them up.
Yeah.
Like they want Eddie to feel that it's that there's only a couple people there, even though there's probably at least double that, if not more.
I think we've already seen that there's like 8 guys in that storeroom. There's 3 at least with Henry.
Yeah.
And I think there was a couple other across the way, is what they said earlier.
Yeah, so it's definitely there's a lot there. So we're kind of building the scene, as it were, is what King is doing. He's letting us know what our characters are walking into, and it is definitely quite a bit, and it's definitely a larger contingent, to be going up against.
Yeah.
And we don't know what kind of weapons they have. I mean, you could assume, being gangsters in the 80s, height of like the Scarface era of drugs and stuff.
All I think about is Uzis. Just from 80s movies.
every 80s action movie.
The bad guy has an Uzi.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, so subchapter 3 starts off here. Says, "Just let me handle it," Eddie said again as Claudio opened the door, and that's in italics. So this isn't him speaking as much as it is him thinking in his head. And then also in italics, "Yes," the gunslinger said, but remained alert, ready to come forward the instant it seemed necessary. Yeah. So that just to me is like a cat, just like, tensed up,
the tail swishing, the butt wiggling a little bit,
just like, where they're down, ready to spring. Like you see it, whether that's a house cat chasing a mouse or whether it's a lion chasing a gazelle. Like I just see that when it comes to Roland, like, despite the fact we know that Roland is far from 100%.
And me here, what I picture is the dust up at high noon. I see the hands hanging over the guns, the fingers twitching a little bit back and forth.
Yeah. And see, this puts him at a disadvantage because he isn't a gunslinger in the natural sense of like, he's someone that's inside of a body that doesn't have a gun, and he'd have to work through that body, so like he doesn't even have like the benefit of being like an actual gunslinger in the sense like what you're thinking, because he can't put his hand over a gun because there is no gun. Like,
no, right.
So that's like, for in his sense, I can imagine how like tense that must be for him.
Exactly.
Because it's like everything you've grown used to, like potentially most of your existence, is suddenly not there anymore. Like you're in a position where
it's like you had to walk out and meet Billy the Kid, or Doc Holliday, in a gunfight in a draw.
Yeah.
And you have to go out there controlling the butcher and having no gun.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. It's like you're way out of your element in this one.
Exactly.
But you could easily beat him if you were you.
Yeah, exactly. And again, he's far from 100%, so it's not like he would even if he had it all there, like he's not at his peak.
There is crystal clear verbiage earlier on the plane and everything like that he feels fine when he's in Eddie, because he goes back to his body one time to move it, and he forgets how bad his body was, and he brings that up.
That's true.
So he feels fine when he's in Eddie, but
he is being affected by Eddie's withdrawals.
Right. Eddie's physical limitations do still affect Roland.
Yeah.
So
he doesn't even have the same keenness because it's going through withdrawals at this point for him. So, which, that's going to be obvious because now he's been off the plane for, he came off the plane 2 hours, called another hour to transport him to where he's at. So he's, and then like the deplaning, like call that another half hour. So he's a little ways away from his last hit of anything. Because remember, he took a hit in
the night before he left. Yeah.
No, on the plane.
Oh, well, that was snorting. I'm talking shooting.
No, snorting. But, so his last intake of drugs would have been a number of hours. It would have been a number of hours ago. Yeah, and they also mentioned that they were never going to move on to needles. So it's like he didn't even get like a full, like in his mind.
No, that's exactly
bump,
what I was saying. Is the last time he hit fully, when he shot up, was down in the Bahamas when that Sallow thing brought him the stuff, and he made him go get the better stuff. So
yeah, totally. My next note is a little bit further here. It says glass gleamed mellowly everywhere, more glass in this one room than he had seen in all the years since his childhood. And I'll read the rest of it, even just stopping there. Like that's another cool thing. It's just like
we've already seen what his childhood was, and wow.
Yeah. So and so that's a way since he's seen a number of glass, the kind of glass that he's seeing in this restaurant / bar. Then it says when supply lines had begun to break down, partially because of an interdicting raids carried out by rebel forces of Farson, the good man, but mostly he thought simply because the world was moving on. Farson had been a symptom of the great movement, not the cause. And I feel like that's a little bit of an insight to the past. Now that we've had small snippets of the past, and we've had some allusions to the past, and this is just another one of those passing allusions. But we've heard of Farson before, right? In his flashback, because Hax the cook was working for Farson to poison some children or something.
It was an entire town.
The whole town that would have had children and stuff. So I can't remember if they called him the good man, but we know the name Farson for sure. But here I just love that, just because that almost feels like something that last bit. Farson had been a symptom of that great movement, not the cause, because that feels like one of those things where like you can look at it from a historical perspective to know. Roland could say that now. But could Roland have said that at the time? Most likely not. Yeah. This is one of those things where, hindsight's 20/20, and I just find that I find it illuminating because, like, I again, we talked about it in the first book. If you could give me an entire book of just like stuff like Stephen Deshane and that kind of stuff, like I would take it because it's that like the universe building that we've seen thus far is great, but it's minimal, and I'm just like, man, I would love
it's also from it's also only from a boy's perspective.
Yeah,
like I mean, we got one part in the Gunslinger where he's up in the the balconies during a banquet. He's not even down there for the full banquet. We don't even see all the ins and outs. Yeah, that's one of the scenes I would love to see if we get a Stephen Deshane book is a banquet. Yeah, like a full-on gunslinger banquet with gunslingers, their women. Yeah, and that's not being derogatory. That's how they Stephen worded it in the book. So yeah, but just that the light that he talks about for that hall and everything like that, and then the dancing and the food too. Yeah, and what goes on there? Like, I mean, what's the purpose of a banquet? I mean, you have to have a reason, Yeah. And to me, it's even just like the machinations of everything. Like even somewhat what this is like touching on is like, Farson was a symptom of that movement, even that movement, so we get an idea there, but they're like, that's just such a loaded statement. It's like, man, you can almost picture you could at least spend a quarter of a book just going into that and expanding it if you wanted to. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff that I just I live for, is like this, like expansion of the mythology, even though in this case, it's only a single line, but I don't know. Every time I get them, I love them because it's just like it's a juicy little morsel that I'm like, all right, cool. It's that food you're chewing. You forgot that it had like chocolate chips in it, and then there's one, that kind of thing.
Or like when you get like some like fries somewhere and like a curly fry gets snuck in.
Yeah. Or we used to have this when we went to Arby's. We'd get curly fries and somehow a mozzarella stick would end up in there. We'd be like, yes, score.
Oh yeah, indeed. So yeah, that's
Did we just compare Gilead and information about it to French fries and mott sticks?
Why not? It's what you know, right? I mean, there's those sweet things in life that just
oh my god, Ted,
that just surprise you, man. And yeah, again, I mentioned earlier, I'm a history fan in reality, so to me, a lot of that applies to my love of of these kind. I mean, whether it be this or even like things like Star Wars, like, you know, in the original movie, like that whole conference scene with all the Imperials and like Vader chokes the dude. Like that's one of my favorite scenes of that movie, because like suddenly you're building like elements of that universe that had up to that. I mean, you're only 20, 30, 40 minutes into the movie. Like suddenly they're building this, like an element of like the past to like show you. And it was this cool peak that like growing up, that's what you had. Of course, later on down the road, we get more movies that expand on that more, but it's like, I live for that scene. I love that scene to this day. I still love that scene because it's just like, it's this cool peek into the past. And as a history fan, when I get into something, if you give me any kind of history, I'm all for it too. You know, so yeah, it's what do you got next?
So the real question is, are you hungry right now like I am? Because that's the reason why I went to the moth stick. So that sounds actually pretty good. Next up, I just have a couple paragraphs down after Roland sees all the different gleaming surfaces and everything. Yeah. And then a sign that he can read, and it means nothing to him, Rockola. And then I love this paragraph. Never mind. There was business to be done here. He was no tourist. He must not allow himself the luxury of behaving like one, no matter how wonderful or strange these things might be. And that just, again, it just goes back to show you the man that Roland is. Yeah. You know, just
he could shut that off.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that I don't know about you, but sometimes for me, it's hard to just control myself like that.
Yeah, I think it is for most of our world. I think that goes back to like what you were saying when they were referencing, like when he was seeing our people, you know, like from our world. Yeah. And he's almost disgusted. Like, I think it would be the same, like if he was to see our people see something that was foreign or exotic to them. Yeah. Like they wouldn't be able to like stop. Most likely that'd be enough to like, I mean, think about like, I mean, not to go back to history again, but like the whole thing with like elephants and like Alexander, like I'm sure a portion, not just the fact that they would have been giant tanks against what, you know, Alexander's forces, that was ground forces and horses,
light cavalry.
But I'm sure that like even people that weren't directly involved with them, it would have taken their attention away. Suddenly they're seeing this creature that they've never seen before or whatever. Like that's going to draw some attention, and like, so then that would give you a tactical advantage if you would have been the Indians in that case.
Let me give you a real world scenario for you. There was an instance just a couple weeks ago where my wife showed me a picture off of Reddit where it was an animal that I had never seen before. She's like, this is a real animal. And I can't remember what it was, but it was something that didn't stick with me. And it was that it was something so colossally weird. I'm like, wait, this isn't something out of like a James Cameron sci-fi flick or something like that? Yeah. It's like, no, this is a real fucking animal that you can encounter if you go to, I think it was like Indonesia or somewhere like that. And it was just like, how weird is it to think that there's people in Indonesia right now and I'm like, oh yeah, there goes one of those animals. Yeah. But if it was me and you walking down the street with this guy, we'd be like, what the fuck is that? And they'd be like, what, you haven't seen a dog before? Basically is how it would seem like, you know, to them.
Yeah, so I think it just goes to speak to Roland again more, is like he's able to just shut it off. And that's just something I don't think that most of us can relate to. I mean, supposing I guess we were put in a situation it was a life or death, maybe it'd be easier. But just in our natural habitats as humans in our world, it's harder to turn that kind of stuff off because, like, I don't know, like, because we're probably never facing the same kind of dangers that he is.
Right. Let's go another real world scenario for you. You saw the ocean for the first time a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, sometime now. Yeah.
Few years ago.
Yeah.
How was that? Like the first time you saw that? I mean, just
it was breathtaking. I mean, because we're from Utah, landlocked. I mean, we got the Great Salt Lake, which is a big body of water. It's right outside of the Great Lakes, it's the biggest in the country. But it's just something different though. Like
it is.
And what took my breath away is just like, okay, because like you get the sense like it's like one of those things I think like people's talk about. You could see the Mona Lisa picture of it, but when you actually see it in person,
it's different.
Yeah, it's different. And I think that's what it was. Like the scale of it was like hard to picture, and it was the Pacific to give
no
which is even more. But I think what it was is just I saw like one of those freight boats off in the distance, and like it's tiny. It looked like a micro machine,
but you knew how big it was.
But it's like I look at it, I'm like, well, on top of that is shipping containers. I've been inside of shipping containers. I've had jobs that stored stuff in shipping containers. I know what size they are, and so it's like, so then suddenly to think that like, oh well, that thing's stacked 50 feet of shipping containers high on top of this massive ship, but it's like so small that I could, pick up like a Hot Wheels car and it'd probably shadow it out,
right?
From where I'm sitting. So that's suddenly what gave me like the realization of the size, and it was just it's breathtaking.
Now in the middle of that, well, like when you first see that ship, when you start going down that trail, imagine having to turn that off and turn around and doing something
and focus on something else.
And focusing on something else.
Yeah,
it'd be almost impossible for us in the way we were raised in our cultures.
Yeah, because we don't. Yeah, exactly. Because we're not facing the same kind of life or death situations that Roland is pretty much all the time.
Right.
And I think like that's one of those things we saw in the last book with Jake. Jake couldn't understand the dangers that was around. You know what I mean? He just didn't. So
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess like it almost reminds me of like Yellowstone. It seems like every year, at least 2 or 3 times a year, you hear about these stories of people like you're trying to take selfies of like bison, and then just get freaking pulverized by them. It's just like people just don't have a sense sometimes of the danger that even in cases they are in danger, they don't realize it.
You know the one that blows my mind when you talk about something like that is freaking trains. People try and get up to the tracks and take a picture with the train coming towards them.
Selfies and stuff.
Yeah, it's like, guys, that's a freaking freight train. Have you seen what those things do to semi-trucks? You know what semi-trucks do to cars, right?
Yeah.
And you know what cars do to people, right? Okay, why are you putting a person next to a train? Don't do that.
Yeah, indeed.
It's along those lines for me.
Yeah, no doubt. So that's the next note I have is the next paragraph. It said the man who had let them in was clearly the brother of the man who drove what Eddie called the van, and then in parentheses it says as in Vanguard, Roland supposed. And I like that because like again going back to his world, because I mean I guess like if you're not into like fantasy type stuff or like ancient stuff, like Vanguard would basically be the front lines of the battle. Yeah. Like the front, like, like if your Vanguard forces, you're basically like right in the middle, right up front.
Yeah. Front and center.
Yeah. Those are the ones that are, like if you were, like looking at like defending a thing, like a fort, and you had a gate, your Vanguard's going to be the people right in front of that gate, where if that thing goes down, the first people to engage, whoever comes through,
the Vanguard
would be your Vanguard. Yep. So I find that hilarious that like Roland associates those things. Because like, and it makes me wonder, what the hell is van even derivative of? Like, where did van come from? Like, it's such a weird word, like to be associated with what they are too. So it's just like, I don't know. Just I'm one of those types that loves to see like where words come from and where they derive from. So that's that piqued my curiosity even just recently. I haven't even had a chance to look into it yet, but it's like, where did van come from?
Because you know where truck came from. It's a pickup truck. So, that makes sense that we shortened it to truck. And car comes from something I can't remember what, but van, you're right.
Yeah.
Where would van come from?
Yeah. It's kind of
weird.
So yeah, that's cool. And then it says, although he was much taller and perhaps 5 years younger, he wore a gun in a shoulder rig. Again, Roland being able to, instantly spot people carrying firearms because, again, like, and also we know how rare they are in his world too. So I think that'd be something that would stand out to him, Like, whereas
it's like the paper on the airplane. It just instantly caught his eye.
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely something he would definitely catch on to. Do you have anything else in this subchapter?
The Eddie right here. I thought it was my boy. Where's Henry? He asked. I want to see Henry. He raised his voice. Henry! Hey, Henry! No reply. Only silence in which the glass hung over the bar seemed to shiver with a delicacy that was just beyond the range of a human ear. Mr. Balazar wants to speak to you first. You got him gagged and tied up somewhere, don't you? Eddie asked. And before Claudio could do more than open his mouth to reply, Eddie laughed. No, what am I thinking about? You got him stoned, that's all. Why would you bother with ropes and gags when all you have to do is keep Henry quiet is needle him? Okay, take me to Balazar. Let's get this over with.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, and we're seeing that from Henry. I mean, he's damn near catatonic. And that's before they're doping him up. So it's like
another shot. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he doesn't seem like one that you'd necessarily have to tie and gag necessarily.
No kidding.
Mark brought up an interesting one, Caravan.
Oh yeah, that's probably where it's from.
That's probably where it is from. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good call, Mark. That's a great thought for sure. When it comes to like vans and stuff, and I think that like in terms of per capita, I'd say that our state's probably got the most vans of any state in the country.
Yeah.
This state's got a lot of big families. So.
Soccer moms.
Okay, so subchapter 4 starts off here. I have a note. The gunslinger looked at the tower of cards on Balazar's desk and thought, another sign.
And again, it goes back to what we were just talking about with signs and omens and stuff.
Yeah. Again, it's something that Roland actually is going to appreciate and going to take things from. Whereas like Eddie, I honestly wonder if Eddie even noticed or put it. I mean, I guess he doesn't have the same, fixation
affinity
on towers necessarily. But even just like Eddie to like interpret the fact that Roland freaked out about the sign would maybe even be something that maybe like whatever, I don't, who knows? I guess like we can't blame him necessarily, but at the same time,
he's a little predisposed, worried about his brother here. All right.
Yeah. Does he worry about anything else ever?
It's a good point. It's a good point.
Oh, okay.
You know, considering everything he's doing is for his brother. He says that earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
they have given us that idea quite a bit now. So, then a little bit further down, I have let's cut through it. Eddie said, "You know, it comes down to one thing or the other. Either the feds are running me, or they had to let me go. You know, they didn't sweat it out of me in just 2 hours. And you know, if they had, I'd be down at 43rd Street answering questions between an occasional break to puke in the basins." And then Balazar says, "Are they running you, Eddie?" "No, they had to let me go. They're following, but I'm not leading." "So you ditched the stuff," Balazar said. "That's fascinating. You might tell me how one ditches 2 pounds of coke when on a jet plane. It would be handy information to have. It's like a locked room mystery story." So, yeah, I mean, again, it goes to the thrust of it. Is it's just like, if you did dump it and didn't get caught, like, I mean, because we saw, like they said, like, even if you flushed it, like they could just pump the tank and test the contents. Like, you're in a basically in a freaking jar on an airplane. There is nothing there's no way to get out of it necessarily. So,
which is one of the reasons why Balazar is so curious.
Exactly, and because we've seen both sides of this now. We've seen the same thing when the one pilot was freaking out, and the other pilot's just like, "Well, what if he flushes it? You know, they pumped the thing, and we still
got him anyways."
Yeah. So, you know, for Balazar, he's like, "Well, if he got out, they didn't catch him. So even flushing it wouldn't done it. So how the hell did you do it? You know?
Show me the magic trick. You know, show me how you did it. Basically,
exactly. What do you got next?
Actually, it's the next line. "I didn't ditch it, but I don't have it anymore either. So who does?" Claudio asked, and then blushed when his brother looked at him with dour ferocity. "He does," Eddie said, smiling and pointing at Enrico Balazar over the tower cars. "It's already been delivered." And then I love this next paragraph. "For the first time since Eddie had been escorted into the office, a genuine expression illuminated Balazar's face. Surprise. Then it was gone. He smiled politely."
Yeah, and I feel like this like comes down to me, like what I always think of is like poker, you know, like poker face type thing. Like, you know, if you have a good poker face, you know, something is not going to break through. You're going to be able to hold your poise to where, you know, you're not going to tip your hand, not going to whatever, you know. And I don't have. I would assume that Balazar would be a man in his lifestyle that would need to have a pretty damn good poker face. So I feel that for Eddie to break that
in the first minute of conversation,
that's a big deal. I would feel there's a very small number of people in history that have been able to make Mr. Balazar break that.
Go back to the freaking Mick that they were talking about in the previous book club that wants to come in talking about booze and blows the cards over.
Yeah.
Does Balazar blink? Does he rush off, you know, fly off the handle or anything like that? No, calmly opens up the drawer, pulls out a gun, and shoots the dude in the head.
Yeah.
Like, just 1, 2, boom.
Yeah, and then so far, everything we've seen from him, he's been so, like, stoic, you know? Like, he's so, like, he's coasting at a level, at a 5 out of 10, and he never lets that, you know, whatever. And I feel like for the second there, momentarily, that calmness broke, and there was real emotion shown.
But even the next paragraph, look how fast he gets it back.
Oh yeah, and even within that same paragraph, he smiled politely. I feel like that was like one of those, like, it was like a here 1 second, gone the next, like microseconds. Like within microseconds,
right?
It shows for a second, then it's gone. Like one of those, like if you're not even a good poker player to read it, you may have missed it entirely.
Exactly. And then Balazar says, "Yes," he said, "to a location which will be revealed later, after you have your brother and your goods and are gone. To Iceland, maybe. Is that how it's supposed to go?" "No," Eddie said, "you don't understand. It's here, delivered right to your door, just like we agreed, because even in this day and age, there are some people who still believe in living up to the deal as it was originally cut. Amazing, I know, but true." They were all staring at him.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, he's definitely playing him along here, definitely keeping him off balance. You know, it's definitely not what they're expecting. You know, now the question would be, what were they expecting? That'd be a tough one to know. Like, do they expect him to just be like begging, pleading? You know, like I'd be curious. We don't get that insight necessarily from Mr. King here, but I would be curious. Like, you know, definitely this isn't what they're expecting. I don't think they're expecting him to have this edge to him. I don't think they're obviously expecting for him to basically be talking like the drugs are already there. Like, this is all going wrong for them. Like, you know, they're expecting it to zig, and it's zagging, and they just
exactly. And it just goes further along here as it goes down. He asks Roland, "How's he doing?" And Roland says, "I think you're doing very well, but don't let this man Balazar get his balance." Exactly what you're talking about, keeping him off balance. "Eddie, I think he's dangerous." But if we go down a little bit, it says Eddie, looked at Balazar again and dropped him a little wink. That's why you're the one who's got to be concerned with the feds now, not me. If they turn up with a search warrant, you could suddenly find yourself fucked without ever even opening your legs, Mr. Balazar. Balazar had picked up 2 cards. His hands suddenly shook and he put them aside. It was a minute, but Roland saw it and Eddie...
it was minute.
Minute, sorry. Minute.
Yes.
Yeah, forgive me. But Roland saw it and Eddie saw it too. So that tells you how bad it was. If Eddie saw it, even with his, like we talked about with his withdrawals and everything like that, an expression of uncertainty, even momentary fear perhaps, appeared and then disappeared on his face. Just to get it back what we were talking about before. There and gone again.
Yeah. A quick turnaround. Oh yeah, and the Mark's saying in the chat, that's a good point. They're expecting the junkie shuffle.
Yeah, exactly. Like outside with the van and everything like that.
Yeah.
They're expecting him to bop and beep and bop and scratch and
and I'm sure they're expecting fear, they're expecting potentially groveling, they're expecting maybe even like a long tirade of excuses of like what happened, like they're expecting like maybe he got robbed down there or he did all the drugs. I mean, it's not the drugs they do, I guess, but like he fucked something up and maybe he got on the plane without the drugs somehow. Like I almost wonder if they're expecting some, and then just like this long pleading, please don't kill me, please don't come out. They're probably expecting that kind of thing along with like the junkie shuffle. But he definitely comes in way different than probably what they're expecting to see or get from him. So yeah. And then let's see. Jack Andolini look a little bit further down here. Jack Andolini looked alarmed. He's made a deal with him, Mr. Balazar. Those little shits turned over the coke and they planted it here while they were pretending to question him. No one's been here, Balazar said. No one could get close, Jack, and you know it. Beepers go when a pigeon farts on the roof.
That just goes back to that surveillance thing where if you can't, you got to be able to beat them.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no sneaking into this place. And then Andolini says, but, and then Balazar cuts him off, says, even if they had managed to set us up somehow, we would have so many people, or we have so many people in their organization, we could drill 15 holes in their case in 3 days. We'd know who, when, and how. And I feel like another revelation is that they have people on the police force. Balazar does. To say they have people in the organization. So it's one of those things. Obviously, it's like a common like trope in like organized crime stuff. Be it like Don Corleone and The Godfather, but he has policemen, politicians, judges in his pocket. Like that was one of the key things of The Godfather.
Exactly.
So it's just one of those things. Like it's one of those common things that people have their hands out for bribery and stuff. Guys like Balazar would be guys that would be
greasing those palms.
Yeah, exactly. Get ready to throw the money because it's going to benefit you, And I actually just read a book recently about the dude that ran the Silk Road, that online dark web place where you could buy and sell drugs. At one point, when he started realizing the heat was getting turned on to him, what did he do? He went out and started to look around online to find cops that needed money and were willing to get their a year's worth of salary dropped in their hand every time they gave him a good tip. He'd give him $50,000 a throw for information, and it's just like for a dude that's probably making $50,000 a year, you drop him 10 things, you've exponentially grown what you make a year. Like, so it's like I see the reality in it. Even something more recent that was on like 2011, 2012. So it's like, let alone back here in these days when things are a little bit harder to track. Like there'd be a lot of people with their hands out ready to help you out and go, hey, they're about to drop some subpoenas on your organization, or whatever. They're about to raid you.
They're gonna raid your club. This club here is the only one they have a warrant for. If you have anything there, move it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also, like what you were saying, it's going to be a lot harder to trace financial stuff for crooked cops back then. It's not so easy now for crooked cops to hide it. I know that we've seen that recently where cops have, even where they have like offshore accounts and everything like that, they're available to trace them and everything like that back to them.
Yeah.
So
I feel like it adds some more mystique to Balazar and shows like he's not just a street thug. I mean, because there are those guys that are like mobsters, but they're mostly street level. I feel like when you start to get into the realm of like having people in the police department that work for you, or or on the payroll, like that ups you a little bit. You're a little bit higher than just the street. You're playing at a little bit higher level, and that even puts you in a situation where like if Eddie had went to 43rd Street, do you think that potentially he gets accidentally
all of a sudden he has an accident where he tried to pull a cop's gun and his partner had to shoot him or something like that?
Yeah, or like suddenly the wrong paper gets filled out and suddenly he gets let out when he's not supposed to be, and then he gets gunned down outside the station. You know, like,
or he commits suicide in his cell or something like that.
yeah, it's one of those things like, you know, it feels like this is what this is showing us is that Balazar, even jail wouldn't be safety for Eddie.
Which is why he has so many questions, because if they went to 43rd Street, they would have tried to protect him, even with all of these crooked cops trying to get to him. They would have known, okay, Balazar's probably got some people on the inside. We got to keep it small. We got to keep it. I know Tad. I can trust Tad. And I know that I can trust Mark over here. The three of us are going to be the ones who run Eddie. That's it. No one else is going to know that he's here. We're going to bring him in the back. We're going to have him in disguise and everything like that. He's not going to be handcuffed. He's not going to be, you know, everything like that. He's going to come in like a maintenance guy, you know, that kind of thing. But here is where Balazar gets the curveball. Eddie was released 2 hours later on his own volition.
Yeah.
From Kennedy, not from 43rd Street. So that's why he's got so many questions. It even goes further back where you get more information further on here in the chapter, and then you go back to think about that original statement about Balazar needing answers. You know, he needs those answers. He's a curious type kind of guy.
Yeah, totally. And then it goes on here, and Balazar says, Eddie, he said, you have 15 seconds to stop bullshitting, then I'm going to have Simi Dreddo step in here and hurt you. Then after he hurts you for a while, he will leave, and from a room close by, you'll hear him hurting your brother. Eddie stiffened. Easy, the gunslinger murmured, and thought, all you have to do to hurt him is to say his brother's name. It's like poking an open sore with a stick. And I feel like, I feel like that's something that we probably know by now, but I feel like if nothing else, this puts an exclamation point on it that, you know, there's almost a physical reaction if you bring his brother up. And not even like, I don't even know if it's necessarily even the threat as much as it is just like having Balazar mention his brother. I almost wonder, is that what's making Eddie recoil?
It's
you know,
like the word brother.
Yeah, and coming from anyone, but especially coming from someone like Balazar, that's obviously a little bit more dangerous. But I almost get the sense personally, and maybe this isn't exactly in the text, but I get a sense that Eddie's probably going to somewhat, you know, whatever towards his brother, regardless of it being a threat. I feel like he would probably have the same reaction if it was just like, you know, Balazar asking, how's your brother? You know,
what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, I feel like you get a reaction. Yeah. And I feel like as a poker player, you know, as Balazar, we've been equating him to here, he's going to know that that's a button to push, and potentially he's pushing that button on purpose to get a rise out of him, to, you know,
to draw Eddie's attention away.
And to maybe even put him off balance a little bit, you know, so.
Get back on balance while throwing your opponent off balance. It's that balancing act, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So what do you got next?
It's actually the next part, the next paragraph. I'm going to walk into your bathroom, Eddie said. He pointed at the door in the far left corner of the room, a door so unobtrusive it could have almost been one of the wall panels. I'm going in by myself, and I'm going to walk back out with a pound of your cocaine. Half the shipment. You test it? Then you bring Henry in here where I can look at him. When I see him, see he's okay, you're going to give him our goods, and he's going to ride home with one of your gentlemen. While he does, me and Roland he almost said, me and the rest of you guys we both know you got here, can watch you build that thing. When Henry's home and safe, which means no one's standing there with a gun in his ear, he's going to call and say a certain word. This is something we worked out before I left, just in case. The gunslinger checked Eddie's mind to see if this was true or bluff. It was true, or at least Eddie thought it was. Roland saw Eddie really believed his brother would die before saying that word in falsity. The gunslinger was not so sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that he almost slips and says Roland. That's got to be tough from his perspective, because his reality is now the fact that he has Roland in his head. You know, so it's one of those things where maybe you forget that, like, there's a different reality. The other people don't realize what you're, and it's like almost like if you have like a secret, you know, of some kind, and like you accidentally say the wrong thing that doesn't necessarily even reveal the secret, but it reveals maybe
that you know the secret.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like almost that kind of thing, but he's able to cover for himself, but he almost slipped up there. And then I also love that, you know, Roland is not so sure, like that last little bit there.
Yeah.
You know, Eddie believes it, but Roland isn't so sure. And honestly, I think I have to side with Roland, because, I mean, we've obviously had a peek into, you know, what Henry's condition is, you know, and I just like, and even like there's been reference when Jack Andolini, and because remember Eddie started yelling at him about how Henry's fine when they were picking him up originally, and he's like, he's not fine. So it's like, I don't feel like what we're seeing with Henry, with the whole Johnny Cash scenes, I don't feel that that's abnormal. I don't feel like that's just because he's close to death's door. I feel like that's probably the way Henry's been for some time. So so it's one of those, like, to me, I have to believe, like, are you sure, man? Are you sure? Like, one, is he going to remember the word? Two, is he not going to say it if they freaking give him the right fix? Or, you know, what it's just one of those things, like, Eddie's trusting his brother, and it's like one of those things that you almost have to do, but I don't think that brother deserves it.
it's definitely a point when we look at the either last book club or the book club before that, where Eddie talks about the trip and why he was picked instead of Henry, where he was able to stop shooting up in his arms because they looked like mosquito bites, and the custom guys noticed it. He's like, mosquito bites,
Yeah.
no big deal. He had been shooting up in his thigh all the way up near his testes and everything like that.
Yeah.
Henry wouldn't have been able to do that. That was the part that I remember from that. And seeing Henry now, yeah, dude, like Eddie calls him, and I think Andolini even says it too. Henry's a walking conviction.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that was a little while back, but yeah. You know one too, there's it's from The Sopranos. There's one that, and he's a mobster, but he's doing drugs and he's not supposed to, because like obviously like
right.
drugs is one of the big things that took the mafia down in the 80s and stuff. So it's one of those things that most mobsters don't like, they don't want it around them, because like, if you're the boss and like one of your lieutenants is doing drugs, the feds can pin that on you to put you away and dealing drugs and stuff. So this is one of those things you can't do. It's a no. So this character that's doing drugs, where he's shooting up
Between his toes,
in the webbing between his toes.
Yep. Yeah.
That's uncomfortable to me. I don't like that. It's like the getting the paper cut and the webbing of your fingers.
It reminds me of a Jackass movie when they do that.
It's just not comforting to.
Or when one of them does it right here in the corner of their mouth where your lips meet.
Yeah, but like just the webbing of yeah. So in one part of that show, they're showing him shoot up by putting a needle in between his freaking toes. I'm just like, no, don't do that. Don't show me that. Okay. Sorry, I just clicked in the wrong spot. Okay, yeah. So what do you got next?
Jack is instructed to go search Balazar's bathroom. Balazar tells him there's a small panel in the back wall of the medicine cabinet. He said, I keep a few personal things in there. It might not be enough to hide a pound of dope in, but maybe you better check it. And then a little bit further down, Balazar's eyes flicked back to Eddie. Why do you want to tell me such crazy lies? He asked, almost sorrowfully. I thought you were smart. Look in my face, Eddie said quietly, and tell me that I am lying. Balazar did as Eddie asked. He looked for a long time, and then he turned away, hand stuffed in his pocket so deeply that the crack of his peasant's ass showed a little. His posture was one of sorrow over an erring son. But before he turned, Roland had seen an expression on Balazar's face that had not been sorrow. When Balazar had seen in Eddie's face, had left him not sorrowful, but profoundly disturbed.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, again, it's not going the right way. I feel like it's one of those things like, he was told, or we saw he was told by his uncle not to trust junkies. But I feel like if he had an excuse for why he was trusting junkies, it might be because in his mind they're predictable, and suddenly this one's not predictable anymore.
He didn't just trust any junkie. He picked Eddie for a reason because he saw something in Eddie, and he says that earlier in the last book club, actually, where he sees and it's Roland's line basically, but it's Balazar says it differently. But basically, he saw a steel inside of him. Yeah,
Plus, he knew he had the leverage with his brother.
Exactly, he knew that he could leverage him with the brother, and that there was something inside of Eddie that even if he was caught, he wouldn't break.
Yeah,
which is what he was saying earlier. 2 hours isn't long enough for them to get it out of Eddie. Which means he obviously has at least somewhat of an opinion that this guy's at least tough enough to survive 2 hours of interrogation.
Yeah, and even in this conversation, he's called him smart too. So that's something that you're not necessarily going to get in every junkie, and you're not going to have the kind of people that generally is going to be surrounding like the mob and this drug trade and stuff are generally not going to be the most intelligent people overall. They're generally going to be people that are maybe a little bit less on that end of intelligence. So, for him to believe that Eddie has that intelligence is going to, have him be, it's going to have him see like not just the steel, not just the leverage, but also the smarts, because you're going to need some intelligence, because if you do get questioned, you need to be smart enough to know what to say. You need to be smart enough to know, what to do, what not to do. I mean, at the same time, we could say truthfully that Eddie was probably wrong in the fact that he should have been smart enough not to even snort some of the drugs in the airplane, and he talked about I guess his rationale behind it was that he was going to throw up if he didn't.
Yeah, he felt like he might pass out or throw up.
Yeah, so I guess, but at the same time, there's an intelligence there that is not normal, and I feel like with all of those things combined is probably why he has chosen Eddie for this job. Okay, and then the next we got to subchapter 5. And then it says, I don't like this, Balazar thought as he waited for Jack Annalini to come back out of the bathroom. He was scared, suddenly sweating, not just under his arms or in his crotch, places where he sweat even when it was the dead of winter and colder than a well digger's belt buckle, but all over. Eddie had gone off looking like a junkie, a smart junkie, but still a junkie, someone who could be led anywhere by the skag fish hook in his balls, and had come back looking like what? Like he had grown in some way, changed. It's like somebody poured 2 quarts of fresh guts down his throat. So I feel like that there is putting even more of a fine point on it. It's like suddenly there's guts there. And, you know, of all the things that we've been told about Eddie, is guts is not necessarily anything that they've credited to him to this point. So, yeah, like it's I can see why from Balazar's perspective why that would be disturbing a little bit, you know? Like you have this one that generally has been like one you can kind of guide by the nose a little bit. Like, yeah, he has some intelligence, he, you know, whatever, but you could still control him.
Well, it goes back to like what Mark was saying. They were expecting the junkie shuffle. They're expecting this of him. And like it says here, they have him. It doesn't even bring up his brother. It just talks about the drugs that he's hooked on.
Yeah.
So that alone should be enough to control this man. But Balazar's like, what the hell? This guy came back with, you know, like it says, like someone poured guts down him, you know?
Yeah. And do you think that, where do you think that's coming from? Do you feel like just the slight experience he's had with Roland has changed that for him?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because that feels to me like strange because there hasn't been a whole lot necessarily outside of the fact of like getting over like this stuff, whatever. But it's like, where does
I think there might be one other thing. I'm sorry to cut you off. I think that maybe part of it is with Roland's help, he beat Customs.
Yeah, so
I think, you know, there's a little bit more confidence in him now.
That's true.
And the thing is like Balazar says, Eddie's smart. One of the things that what did Balazar do when Eddie arrived? Dummy up, send the guys away.
Oh yeah.
I don't want anyone else. I don't want him knowing that there's other guys here, right?
Yeah.
What did Eddie know? Oh, he knows there's other guys there.
Yeah, yeah.
And he knows what Balazar's thinking, knowing that it wasn't enough time for them to break me, and you know they're not running me because it wasn't enough time because I didn't go down to 43rd Street. Everything that Balazar thought, Eddie figured out for himself.
Yeah.
That wasn't Roland doing that.
Yeah.
So that was the smarts that Eddie had. I think that the confidence he got by beating the Customs, and then not only beating them, but he also spotted them following him, and he also got that quip into that one that was looking at the T-shirts.
Yeah, he spotted some, though.
He's only spotted 2 out of the 5. Let's be honest. Let's be honest here.
Yeah, Roland had to spot some of the others. But, you know, it's true. He did spot some of them.
He did spot some of them, and he beat them. And he beat them on his own, I would say, with Roland's help. But going, you know, it's one thing to have, you know, Mick in your corner, but Rocky's the one that still got up and, you know, actually punched Apollo out, you know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Giving you guys a Rocky reference there in case anyone's wondering. You Adrian, you know, kind of thing. And that, you know, it's one thing to have a guy in your corner, but it's another thing for you to actually stand up to the man, you know, as Eddie would say it.
Yeah.
And actually knock them down. And he didn't just knock them down, man. He flat embarrassed them, basically. I mean, that's why that older officer was like, get him his clothes. And then, you know, when no one did it, he's like, all right, get him his clothes. Didn't you hear me? You know, like, mad.
Yeah.
Because he was embarrassed. Eddie embarrassed them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and that's probably where a lot of it comes for sure. That makes sense, I guess. I don't know why I wasn't connecting that in my mind. I was just like, man, is it just like having this like encounter with Roland enough to like give guts to this kid? But no, it's true.
Well, did you ever have that too, where like a video game has been giving you a hard time and stuff like that, and then you take a break, you come back and you kick its ass that very first time, and you're just like, oh yeah, I got this now. You know, it's that swagger a little bit. And he got a little bit of swagger in him because he beat the shit out of the Customs guys.
Yeah, it's true.
And not to mention, Eddie's just a plain old badass. Just accept it, Tad.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll take your word for it.
You don't give my boy any kind of credit.
Oh man. Let's see. And then right here, I like this because it's in like in italics. So I almost feel like it's maybe even just like Eddie almost speaking through his face. And it says, look in my face and tell me that I'm lying. So he had, what he saw was upsetting. What he saw was that Eddie Dean was perfectly confident. He intended to go into the bathroom and come back with half of Balazar's goods. And Balazar almost believed it himself. And I feel like that, like I like that, like even just the way of writing that with like the italics. I feel like that's almost a way of like, I interpret that as like just one of those like giving that a look to someone that they clearly know what you're doing. You know, you're challenging him. It's like, okay, come on, like try me type thing.
Yeah, and even the paragraph before that is so much a tale of Balazar. There was no dope in his bathroom, no dope on Eddie or in him. There was no dope in Eddie's clothes, his jacket, or his traveling bag. So it was all nothing but a bluff. So it's like that like arguing with yourself almost, because then it goes into like what you were saying. Look at my face and tell me that I'm lying. So it's like he knew that Eddie doesn't have drugs, but Eddie's face says otherwise. Yeah. So it's like that the pendulum keeps swinging back and forth. He doesn't have the drugs. There's no way it could be here. Well, wait, but his face says he's not lying. I really believe that he's telling the truth. But how could he have done that? You know, just like it's this back and forth with Balazar. And could you imagine how infuriating that would be?
Oh yeah, that'd be tough because ultimately you're being strung along, and if you're a guy like Balazar, you're not used to being strung along.
No, especially by a damn junkie.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like somewhat of like the being dressed like a whatever, like the homeless person makes you to where people don't give you any regard, and then so suddenly if you were to do something extraordinary, like it's even more surprising because it was from someone you didn't expect.
Exactly.
Did you have any notes the rest of this subchapter? My next one's the very tail end of this subchapter.
I love Eddie. I love his humor. So
of course.
Hurry up, Jack. I got this junky shit on my hand, Claudio yelled angrily. If I had known you were going to be prospecting up there, Claudio, I would have wiped my ass with a chair leg last time I took a dump, Eddie said mildly. Your hand would have come out cleaner, and I would be standing here feeling like I just got raped by Ferdinand the Bull.
Yeah, he was certainly searched thoroughly.
He's confident, isn't he?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Despite the abuse, despite the fact that he is now in the buff, as it were.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. Then my last note here or my note for this subchapter here is the very last paragraph. It says, "I think maybe he's done it. I don't know how. I don't care. The only thing I know for sure is I don't like any of this. Not one damn bit." Yeah.
And that's Balazar, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Balazar thinking, kind of from his perspective, giving us the italics there. So then subchapter 6.
First line.
All right, go ahead.
First line. George Biondi also had something not to like. He doubted if Eddie Dean was going to be wild about it either. George was pretty sure at some point after Simi had come into the accountant's office and doused the lights, Henry had died. Died quietly with no muss, no fuss, no bother. That simply floated away like a dandelion spore on a light breeze. George thought maybe it had happened right around the time Claudio left to wash his shitty hand in the kitchen. I like how Stephen King did this. I really wanted to emphasize this, is that we could have seen Henry die. Instead, we get the reaction of the guy with him.
Yeah.
Instead of in the other room, Henry convulsed silently and then slipped away. Or so, even like a small thing like that. Instead, we don't get that. We get the reaction to one of Balazar's men's realizing that Henry had died.
Yeah.
And it also tells you exactly when. Have you ever had an instance like this? King does it all the time, where just before that, he gives you a timeline. Eddie's being searched.
Yeah.
Eddie gets his prostate checked.
Well, we were talking about that earlier in this book with when we were crossing back and forth between Roland and Eddie on the airplane, because remember they'd give us specific lines and stuff to where we were able to like kind of jive it up and realize like what was going on with each character at any given time, but he had kind of done it in a way that was structured way differently to where you almost had to piece it together yourself. Yeah.
Right.
So we've seen that in this book even.
It's such a big deal if you go back and read the subchapter before this. To see Eddie making jokes. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to read that joke. He's making that joke right about the time his brother's dying.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, think about that for a second,
yeah.
man. If Eddie knew that, you know how pissed he'd be?
Yeah, indeed.
It's just one of those things that caught me this time reading is that part there at the end of the paragraph here. George thought maybe it had happened right around the time Claudio left to wash his shitty hand in the kitchen, which was right around the time Eddie was cracking those jokes. There's a couple others after the Ferdinand the Bull one and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just one of those ones that if you go back and reread that subchapter immediately after reading that part, it changes the whole context of that subchapter right there for you.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, that's good. That's some good stuff for sure, and definitely one that you'd miss unless you're really piecing it together. Then my next one is a little bit down. Let's see. Henry's scrawny, junky chest wasn't moving up and down. There wasn't anything inside going thump, thump, thump. For Henry Dean, it was all over. For Henry Dean, the ball game had been rained out in the seventh inning. Wasn't nothing ticking but his watch. He moved into the heavy old country atmosphere of olive oil and garlic that surrounded Simi Dretto. I think we might have a problem, George whispered. So that's kind of where we're, where we leave these guys is basically him reporting. It's like, we have an issue here.
Uh-oh.
Because now, in a lot of ways, you've lost, they've lost the leverage in a lot of ways. If Eddie is to find out, in that earlier in this chapter, like he's basically whispering to Henry because you can't say it too loud because the walls are thin. Because it's one of those things you can't let that, don't let that card out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you need that card. Like that's one of your big things right now. Like if, I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know what their full plan is for, especially from these guys' perspective. But it is still one of those things you probably don't want to reveal that if it turns out that, Balazar wanted to keep that hidden.
Well, Balazar wants answers, and one of the problems is that if Eddie finds out that Henry's dead, what's Eddie going to do?
Yeah.
He's going to attack someone. He's going to force someone to draw a gun and shoot him.
Yeah.
Balazar's going to be unhappy if he doesn't get his answers.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is someone's going to have to pay for Henry dying, which in turn caused them to kill Eddie, which means that Mr. Balazar doesn't get what he wants.
Yeah.
So that is a very big problem to be having right there.
And I think some of that comes from knowing Balazar's mind. No, I just wonder from these guys' perspective, what are they, do they even know that much? Or do they just know that, like, we probably don't want to be the one to reveal this. Like, maybe we could try to get the information to Mr. Balazar and let him do with it whatever he wants, but we don't want to be the ones to break it
To Eddie.
Because who knows? Because again, I just like to put myself in their minds. It's like you're kind of almost outside this card game, and you don't know exactly what's going on, maybe, and maybe you don't know like what card you're, one card your boss has. But beyond that, you don't know what he wants to do with it. You don't know what play he wants to play. You don't know any. All you know is like, I don't want to be the one to fuck it up. And
right.
like if blowing over one of his houses gets you killed, imagine blowing a big card game essentially.
Well,
what's going on here? What's that going to do? That's probably going to end up dead too.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you don't want to be that third baseman that drops that ground ball in the top of the eighth and ruins the perfect game,
Or what about we can go Buckner.
Oh,
First baseman letting it roll between your legs.
Easy out. It was such an easy out.
For any baseball fans, you might get that, and some of you might even be brokenhearted if you're from
What is it, George Buckner, right?
No, it's not George. I don't remember his first name, but it's not George. That doesn't sound right. Bill Buckner.
Bill Buckner.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that's a little. You guys can Google that one. That's one of the all-time most tragic baseball things there. But yeah, so that's the end of subchapter 6. And then as we go into subchapter 7, did you have any notes, more or minor, toward the next, like the latter 2/3 of the section here?
I got some in the beginning, actually.
Okay.
Jack comes out of the bathroom. There's no dope in there, he said. His flat eye studied Eddie. And if you were thinking about the window, you can forget it. That's 10-gauge steel mesh. I wasn't thinking about the window, and it is in there, Eddie said quietly. You just don't know where to look. I'm sorry, Mr. Balazar, Andolini said, but this crock is just getting a little too full for me. Balazar studied Eddie as if he hadn't heard Andolini. He was thinking very deeply, thinking about magicians pulling rabbits out of hats. I don't know why, but that just gets me,
Yeah.
And then even there, you got a guy from the audience to check out the fact that the hat was empty. What other thing that had never changed, that no one saw into the hat but the magician, of course. And what did the kid said? I'm going to walk into the bathroom. I'm going in by myself.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So he's starting to kind of piece some of it together to figure out maybe a way to upset the tricks here. Yeah. Is it Agamorphe says, please no sports talk. Hey, at least in my defense, it's at least a Red Sox player. So in the Stephen King life, like I'm pretty sure Stephen King was rather heartbroken by this play that we were just talking about. So that was our Stephen King's beloved Red Sox that was doomed by Mr. Buckner there. So in my defense, even though there is no defense, it's true. But if there is a defense, it's at least something that Stephen King would, I wonder, have you read anything? Because he references the Red Sox throughout his stories. Different characters will talk about them and stuff. But I'm not sure if he ever references Buckner or not. That would be an interesting. That'd be an interesting one to know.
Yes, but I can't talk about it.
Okay, because I know, there's always a lot of like talk when it comes to Red Sox, because ultimately a lot of his stuff takes place in Maine, so those people would probably be a little bit more associated with like Boston or whatever. Versus,
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have any Maine sports necessarily, so
No, New England though. New England, Boston is New England. Look at every major sport.
yeah.
All 4 of the major sports, New England roots for Boston.
Oh, totally. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's just like one of those that Maine itself doesn't have its own sports. So no, it's just one of those things. And he's even written like that nonfiction Red Sox book.
Yeah.
That I can't even remember what it's called, but I remember I've seen it at the bookstores because I was just like, wait, that's a sports book. Wait, that says Stephen King.
Yeah.
And like I even picked it up at one point because I'm like, there's no way this is the right Stephen King. Like, is this just some stupid author that like has the same name and decided not to use a freaking pen name? And then I looked at it and I'm like, oh wait, yeah, that's right. I forgot Stephen King was a Red Sox fan. So, and then Agrimorphy says, "Go Cubs, go!" So yeah, hey, Cubs have the same kind of.
Both curses were broken. We don't even need to go into that.
It's
anymore.
true, but with the Cubs thing, you could always go Bartman and.
Oh, you had to go there, Tad. See, #Tad is terrible. It wasn't even directed at me this time. It was directed at one of you. Now you'll understand. He is a terrible, terrible person.
I had someone, I can't remember, there's someone I saw on my social media recently that was mentioning something about that, and then like some other people didn't know about it. So,
Yeah.
so that just over the course of this last week, I've like went through and like relived the whole thing through like, watching videos and like reading like headlines and stuff, because I was just like, it was weird to me because it's like, oh yeah, that happened a while ago, but like, yeah, it was strange to me that this person had no like knowledge of what it was. But yeah, so let's a little bit further down here.
Chat for you.
#Ted is terrible. It took you a while. We're getting close to the end of the episode here before you got that one in.
You haven't said anything to me for once.
You kind of have to slide it in there right in the fourth quarter. Is that it? Just kind of sneak one in right at the very end.
You know, when it happens, it happens. I'm an honest Joe over here. When it happens, and I calls it like I sees it.
Oh man, the question would be, could we ever get through an episode without getting one?
Oh, we have.
Have we?
Oh yeah.
Doesn't seem likely.
Maybe not since the invention of the hashtag, but.
Okay, so
it's my calling card. What can I say?
So now a little bit further down, it says, "You got a guy from the oh yeah, you read that already, right? You got a guy in the audience check the fact that the hat was empty. Okay, and then it says, knowing the magic trick, how it works was something he wouldn't want to know. Knowing spoiled the fun. I find that interesting too, because for a guy like Balazar, you almost picture like him kind of being one of those
keep going on this one.
Well, no, but what I love about it is like, no, he wants to spoil this one, but what I'm saying is like, he just, if you would have asked me before that line, would you picture Balazar being one that wanted to know the trick of a magic trick, or just be caught up in the mystery or like the allure of it? I would have said he would have been one of those ones pragmatically that would want to know how it worked.
No, because it talks about it last book club where he went and saw David Copperfield and loved it. So he likes magicians. He's liked them his whole life. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean, even liking magicians, there's like, I feel like when you like a magician, there's two ways to like them. You either just want to, like live in the fantasy and like just believe that they're doing whatever, like, freaking witchcraft or whatever they're doing, or you want to know how the tricks work. And I just feel like Balazar being like this like pragmatic businessman, being more of a guy that wouldn't want to know. So and I'm not saying like this is like a bad thing. I'm just saying it's just it's a left turn for me a little bit. I wouldn't have expected it from Balazar.
You know what I think it is? I think what you're thinking is absolutely true. When the trick's on him, when he's the one being called out of the audience to come check the hat, that's where he's going to be like, no, fuck you. I'm going to be knowing how this trick works. But I don't think that if he's just sitting in the audience, he has any problem with it. As long as the trick's not directed at him, which is where I think this is where...
Yeah, it could
where it's funny. A prank is hilarious until it's played on you, kind of thing. I think that's what it is for Balazar. Especially when it comes to his business. Yeah,
that's true. This versus like having a freaking rabbit come out of a hat. I mean, there's a lot of differences. I'm not even like trying to equate this. I'm just saying in terms of like going to David Copperfield, I would have pictured personally with what we know from Balazar up until this line, I would have just guessed he would have been one of those guys that would want to know.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of
I can see that.
It's kind of an interesting twist that like this dude has like almost this childlike element of him that like he wants to believe the magic almost. He doesn't want to know how it works. Like, to me, that's an interesting spin on the character. Mm-hmm. And it's, again, I think it's all the credit to Stephen King to write the character that way, because it's unexpected. It's kind of out of the blue. And that's sometimes the way the spice of life works is like sometimes it's the unexpected stuff from a human being that really throws you off or whatever, maybe even makes them more enduring as characters. Then like a little bit further down here.
Well, real fast right here. It just to finish up that thought on Balazar. This, however, was a trick he couldn't wait to spoil.
Oh yeah.
Like
that's
he
true.
absolutely wants this one spoiled, and that's why right here he throws the curveball at Eddie.
Yeah, he does.
Is that the next part you were gonna?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So he's telling him he's going to go in there, but he's going to go in naked. Eddie's fine. Then he says, but not alone, Balazar said. Eddie stopped at once. His body stiffened, as if Balazar had shot him with an invisible harpoon, and it did Balazar's heart good to see it. For the first time, something hadn't gone according to the kid's plan. Jack is going with you, he said. No, Eddie said at once. That's not what Eddie, Balazar said gently. You don't tell me no. That's one thing you never do. And again, I feel like that's par for the course for the kind of character we're talking about here. You know, a guy like that doesn't get to the position like that by having no told to him. And it reminds me, honestly, of Analyze This with De Niro.
It's been so long since I've seen that.
There's the line in that where the Billy Crystal, the psychiatrist, is like, "Man, you don't hear no a lot, do you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I do, but it's usually no, please, no." So yeah.
Okay.
That's I don't know why that sticks with me, but that's a fun. I like that movie. Okay, so subchapter 8.
The entire subchapter. I mean, you want me to read it? I mean, just
it's not that long, but go ahead.
It's all right, the gunslinger said. Let him come. But Eddie was close to gibbering, barely holding on to his control. It wasn't just the sudden curveball Balazar had thrown him. It was his gnawing worry over Henry, and growing steadily ascendant over all else. His need for a fix. Let him come. It will be all right. Listen, Eddie listened.
Yeah.
So Roland's got a plan. This is where we were talking just a little bit ago about Roland and Eddie. Everything's fine when everything goes according to plan. But even like in the interrogation room, when all of a sudden that guy says, "Hey, take off your shorts," and starts thinking about, we didn't check up there on the upper thighs. Maybe we should check there for needle marks. That's when Eddie decided to blow his top. He tries to tell Balazar no, and Balazar makes it perfectly clear, "I'm not a person you can tell no to." So he's like, But Roland's cool and confident and knows exactly what to do.
Yeah, and the other thing too is to add like a little bit of depth to that is, like with that, you don't tell me no. I feel like there's like an inherent threat, but I almost feel in Eddie's perspective, he sees the threat more towards his brother than himself.
Oh yeah, because he didn't care if who was it, Simi was going to rough him up.
Yeah.
He cared that Simi was going to go rough up his brother
and then let him listen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's one of those things that like I feel like again it goes back to that. Now we're kind of almost seeing what I was saying a little bit ago is if those guys had come in and said that he's dead and said it out loud where everyone knows, now suddenly he loses a large portion of leverage because maybe Eddie refuses to do it and refuses to go if he finds out his brother is dead. But since he still thinks his brother is alive, he's kind of. I mean, Roland, talks him into it a little bit too, but I think there's part of him that was already set on going with it because it's one of those things like you can't tell me no. Like I'm sure Eddie's reading between the lines there to know if I say no, you're gonna hurt or kill my brother. So, where are we at?
Subchapter 9.
Subchapter 9. I think we can go through this. This is a shorter one, and we're getting close to the end of the episode here.
Yeah, it wasn't where we planned to stop. That's why I was wondering where you wanted to draw the line because we're gonna do it again, Tad.
Yeah. We're gonna pretty much fall short of some of the action here, but it's definitely been a good conversation so far. Let's go through 9 though, and then leave us.
Yeah, that's a good place to stop. I just was looking ahead. Yeah, that's a great spot to stop.
Going for 10, going and start up at 10 next time. And then let's see. Balazar watched him, slim, naked man with only the first suggestions of the junkie's typical cave-chested slouch. His head cocked to one side as he watched Balazar. Balazar felt some of his confidence evaporate. It was as if the kid was listening to a voice that only he could hear. The same thought passed through Andolini's mind, but in a different way. What is this? He looks like the dog in those RCA Victor records. Call had wanted to tell him something about Eddie's eyes. Suddenly, Jack Andolini wished that he had listened. So I find that interesting because, obviously the least thing that the furthest thing from Jack's mind when Call was talking was to listen to the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's just suddenly like, oh fuck, I wish I would have listened because
right,
who knows what's going on here? So suddenly Eddie's kind of showing something that none of them are liking. It's clear, and I'm not sure so far have we seen it clear that he's like hearing other from other people's perspective.
Not
like
hearing,
I don't think the stewardesses and stuff looked at him and went, "Man, it looks like he's like hearing things."
Not hearing, but there was an instance in the interrogation room where Eddie kept turning around and looking at the wall.
Yeah.
Well, what are you looking back there? You see bugs crawling up the wall? You know, that kind of thing?
Yeah, totally.
And then when Roland says he has to go, Eddie looks scared. Oh, what's the matter? You suddenly look terrified. That is it so far.
Yeah, so a little bit it's tip, but not in this kind of way where it almost feels
the
like
head tilt.
Yeah. Yeah, is it like the dog head tilting type thing?
It actually is. That's exactly how it describes it.
Oh, yeah. It does. Okay.
He looks like the dog on those old RCA Victor records. You know, the dog that hears the records and does this. You know, the universal sound of a dog tilting its head.
Got that one on tape now.
I'll give you another one. I don't care about that one. It's not me singing. That's the only thing I didn't like. So I like this last part here. Wish in one hand, shit in the other, he thought. That's Andolini. If Eddie had been listening to voices inside his head, they had either quit talking or he had quit paying attention. Okay, he said, come along, Jack. I'll show you the eighth wonder of the world. He flashed a smile that neither Jack Andolini or Enrico Balazar cared for in the slightest. Is that so? Andolini pulled a gun from the clamshell holster attached to his belt at the small of his back. Am I going to be amazed? Eddie's smile widened. Oh, yeah. I think it's going to knock your socks off.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's and that's definitely a good tease there in terms of, because we know ultimately what's going to happen. I feel like a lot of us are, we know like obviously what Eddie has access to, and we probably know what Roland is talking for plan, because there's really only one thing you can do in a lot of ways. So yeah, that's just a good little it's almost like the old serials and stuff where you have like the cliffhanger that you leave the people with, and that's definitely the cliffhanger that we're gonna leave you guys with. So that's it for this episode, for this book club. We'll get into our closing stuff, and also just to answer so we can go ahead and talk about it now when it comes to scheduling. So Agamorphe was just asking about our recording schedule, and has that solidified more now?
It finally got solidified this week. My work had me working weekends with on a swing shift, so I was going to work like a 2 to 11 kind of shift, so I was going to really throw a wrench in our recording schedule. They actually needed people for morning shifts, so I volunteered readily for that. On Saturdays and Sundays, I will be working 9 to 5:30, not the early shift, so we can still look at a recording schedule, maybe a little bit later than what we have tonight, but 7 o'clock, 6:30 maybe.
Which is, it's right now it's about 8 o'clock for us. So just to give you guys perspective of if you're listening to live, what your time is versus our time. We're on the Mountain Time Zone. So maybe starting about an hour previous to now, somewhere in that range. But we do want to make it more consistent. We've generally kind of been at the whims of like what's going on to the weekends and stuff. But I feel like we're gonna try to hammer. I mean, and almost your work schedule might actually help us solidify it more.
Yeah.
I mean, there is like the international listeners and stuff that will be a little bit tougher for them. But that's, I don't know.
We're always going to look at doing shows at different times. I do have Thursday, Friday off. Tad does have Thursday nights and Fridays off.
Yeah.
So we could look at, for our international people, if there's a great interest in us doing a show during your time, let us know. We'll see what we can do. Also, one of the nice things is that my weekly schedule, I'm getting off really early. I get off at 2:30 in the afternoon Mountain Time on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So if we have to end up doing a show sometime in the afternoon after work, I'm more than available for that. I know that Tad's got a different schedule than me, but that's something that we can look at and see what we can arrange.
Yeah.
But the weekends are set now. I will be getting off. We'll be looking at doing shows roughly around this same time, maybe just a little bit later, because
we started around about 6.
We started about 6 o'clock, but that's maybe not enough time if I'm getting off at 5:30 to get all the way from. It's across the valley here in Salt Lake where my work is. It's a little bit away from where me and Tad are actually pretty close, living
so probably
close to each other.
So probably within the realm of about an hour ago, or even around now. In some cases, we might start closer to a nowish, like an 8ish, if depending on how.
It really wouldn't be even need to necessarily be that late. We could look at something like a 7 o'clock. I'd be able to get here by 7. So even just a little bit later.
Yeah.
Or even if you just give me till like 6:30, maybe, an hour to get from work to here, that's probably usually enough time. It takes me about a half hour to get home now. Don't know what the traffic's going to be like. That's going to be something we're going to have to kind of play by ear the first couple times. Next week will be our test run.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. So yeah, that's the update on the schedules, and we'll also cover it on the roundtable next week because we know there are some people that skip book clubs for different reasons.
Yeah.
Some people want to save them for when they're reading it themselves, or some people just want to, I don't know, or if they're like reading another book. We've had people tell us if they're reading like The Stand or 11/22/63, they don't want to listen to the book clubs because it kind of jumbles stuff in their head. So yeah, we generally try to make sure that announcements are told here as well as on the roundtable. So if you listen to the next week's roundtable, you hear an update on that as well, and it'll probably be about that time, around about an hour earlier than it is now.
Later. Oh, I see.
Earlier.
Never mind. I see what you were saying. Listen to Tad, not me.
Yeah. So it's like from now, it's about 8:15 right now. So starting about 7:00 next Saturday, we should be going live. So I'll be ready to join us for a roundtable, and we will see you then. Also, just to sign off for any newer listeners, if you guys want to know, if you want to find us outside of YouTube, you can find our podcast on iTunes. You can also stream it on Stitcher. You could also, if you could also be so kind as to subscribe, rate, and review us on those services, especially iTunes. It helps us out a lot. And then if you want to join the show, Peter can let you know the best way to do that.
Best way to reach us is email. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. You can also follow us on Twitter. It's @DarkTowerPod. That's @DarkTowerPod. And again, just to reiterate, I'm usually on Facebook. Tad's usually on Twitter. So if you want to reach out to either one of us. But Tad does pay attention to Facebook. I found that out this last week.
Yeah.
Last time when I posted what book I was reading and everything, he let me know that some people responded when for some reason I wasn't getting notifications.
No, I think what it is because we both are like the admins on that. I feel if one of us reads something, it marks it as in red.
Oh, that probably
because I've seen that before where like suddenly like it's like I thought I saw a notification for the Dark Tower Palaver thing, but now it's showing there like it's not, it's already been looked at or whatever. Like so I think it's because we're both doing it. So yeah, that kind of thing.
That's probably what it is. And then you can also find our shows on youtube.com/darkttowerpalaver. Just a reminder, you won't find book clubs on there except when we go live because we don't post them because they'll instantly get taken down for any audio clips we use. But feel free to join us whenever we go live on YouTube. Click the subscribe button so that we can, get notification. There's a little bell. You get notifications when we're going live.
Yeah.
And like Tad said, we're looking to go more regularly now that I have a set schedule and everything like that. Tad's got a set schedule. As long as we keep every other weekend open, we should be going about the same time. May throw a curveball here and there, trying to get different times for different people to be able to listen and chime in and everything.
But we'll let you know in advance.
We'll let you know in advance of those.
All right, guys. So until next time, we will say to you as we always do: long days and pleasant nights.
Long days and pleasant nights, folks.
And everyone in the YouTube live stream, thank you for joining us, and thank you for engaging us with some answers on things with Mark and some playful talking about sports, and of course opening it up for the old hashtag for Peter to throw out there. Of course,
you are a terrible person.
So yeah, we will see you guys next time. It's been fun. Thank you for joining us, and see you next week.
See you guys.